Now, Sam, were you a Power Rangers kid growing up?
I was, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Lots of Power Rangers.
I don't know if you can tell, but I spent this morning.
You obviously not a fan.
Just a couple collectibles. Yeah, it's fine. Just a couple. Just a couple. Yeah.
Oh, I should hit record.
Welcome to Certain POV's Another Pass podcast with Case and Sam, where we take another look at movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Let's see how we could have fixed them.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And Sam, do you know what time it is?
It's morphin' time?
It is morphin' time! So we are today talking about the 2017 Power Rangers reboot. And for that conversation, we are joined by Nic Woolfe.
I'm so excited, Case, that I found an Ernie's Gym and Juice Bar shirt online and bought it to make sure I could wear it for this audio-only medium.
Oh, that is more phenomenal.
Y'all, it is really good looking. I wish you could see it, but this is, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably post it on Instagram.
But in addition to Nic, we also have Matty Limerick, because obviously we're talking about Power Rangers.
Yeah, Matty!
Yeah, I've never heard of them, Case, but thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to finally be talking about this movie. It's been a while since it first came out. We did a review of it on Certain Point of View for that screening. We actually did like a pre-show and then post-show conversation with me and Addie. And at the time, I wasn't sure if this would ever be a movie that I felt ready to talk about. And having some distance has sort of helped that. But what we were saying before we got started is that I liked this movie fine, but I thought it was like a bit generic when it first came out. And coming away from it, I actually like it more, although my complaints, I think, have remained. I think it doesn't quite know what it wants to be. And I think that it's certainly taking advantage of the assets that were available in specifically 2017. Like, it's the type of movie where the After Effects templates have already been set up and they're like, oh, cool, we can use those ones and we can run these things. But I'm curious, like, what is everyone's association with Power Rangers? Maddie, you and I have talked a lot about Power Rangers on this call, so since we haven't with Sam and Nic yet, let's start with them.
Yeah.
Nic, you're the one who brought this to the table, so let's start with you. What's your association with Power Rangers?
I was born in 92, and Power Rangers came out a year later. Enough said. I think Power Rangers was only second to Star Wars as far as franchises that have warmed their way into my heart and stuck with me through my adult years. Power Rangers a little bit more than Star Wars these days. But still, I remember watching it from Mighty Morphin to In Space. And then I tried watching Lost Galaxy. I think I gave up midway through the Lights of Orion arc. Came back for Lightspeed. And then I watched a bit of Time Force before quitting again because I wasn't having fun with the toys. Which isn't too much of a surprise because the Sentai, it's based on Time Ranger, had some of the lowest toy sales for that season. So I get it. But then what really got me back into Power Rangers was Linkara and his History of Power Rangers series, which is like, I never thought about this way before. And it wasn't until 2021 where I discovered a Power Ranger watch-along podcast that's been going since 2015 called The Morphing Grid by Jake Mason and Josh Nichols. So I just made it my duty to watch from Turbo up to the then current, which was SPD, and I blitzed through those seasons in like a week. Like, I already did Mighty Morphin through Zeo in 2015. I need to take my time before I go back into that well. But it's been a whole lot of fun. Like, we're up to Overdrive right now, which...
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't be. I'm actually not on the hate wagon as most other people are with Overdrive. My theory is that Overdrive came out a time when hypercritical opinions on the internet were huge. Like, 1 year before, we had Angry Video Game Nerd take off, and then 2008, 1 year later, is the rise of Nostalgia Critic and Channel Awesome. I don't know. I'm not hating myself watching the series currently.
Yeah, I mean, Overdrive is just also, like, it's nested in a pretty strong selection of seasons, so, like, the fact that it's probably the least compared to, like, SPD is really good, Ninja Storm RPM is really good, like...
I was honestly more annoyed with Mystic Force than Overdrive.
Oh,
And some people are. And
that's a whole
no.
other podcast episode then that we have to have.
Like we'll talk about it.
But suffice it to say, there is something to love in every Power Rangers, though, because
yeah.
Operation Overdrive did have the Once a Ranger crossover, which, while I don't think they did enough with it, is the only time we've ever had a team assembled of Rangers from different eras. Like, so that's like, there's cool stuff going on, even in the seasons that people have problems with. Even Turbo, which is where I initially jumped off. Like, there's a lot to really like when I went back and rewatched it. There's good stuff in every iteration of Power Rangers, which also holds true for this movie.
During the past month, while I was like trying to come up with my pitch, I used my 30-day comiXology trial to read through most of the comics, which I bought some. And also because YouTube is now re-releasing the series in like 5 episodes, 6 episode batches, I watched all of RPM to make sure it still held up. I didn't like it just because I was turning 18 at the time and I thought, ooh, this is kind of edgy. No, RPM still holds up for the most part.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. RPM slaps like, whoa. So it's safe to say, though, you are a Power Rangers fan who
Yeah, more than safe to say.
is versed in the franchise as a whole, because there is a lot going on with the franchise. Like, you brought up toys, which I think is important for us to have any conversation about Power Rangers. We've talked about the longevity of the programming, the fact that like it started before you were really able to absorb media, and it has persisted is a really cool spot. So you're coming with a wealth of knowledge.
My brother was also born in 1990, so that also helped because the toys probably went to him first and then to me.
Oh, it's in addition, you've got the older sibling with a fan kind of thing going on, which can really reinforce fandom. Sam, how about you? What's your association with Power Rangers?
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot less extensive. It's going to be just the original series. Because I was like about, I'm older. So I was about like maybe 11 when it started airing. And it was just on every afternoon when I was at my grandmother's house, and it was really fun. I actually come from a family that does martial arts, and so automatically that was something that I was totally into. And the putties were funny, and I actually did not watch this movie as one of the people that abstained from watching this movie because I just was so upset about the Rita design that I could not bring myself to go to see this film. However, watching it, I have to say that I did the film a disservice because I did enjoy it. And I'm kind of sad that I missed out on the opportunity, even though Rita is not what I wanted to be, which I was a little sad because it's Elizabeth Banks. And I think she's the bee's knees and I love her. But I just still, we can get into it when we get into it.
We'll get into it. I'm excited because I have a note that literally just says Elizabeth Banks is inspired casting.
Listen, she's not bad. She's not bad in this. She's not bad in anything she does. I will die on that hill. People can attack me on that hill. I love Elizabeth Banks. She is the bee's knees. She's the best thing since sliced bread. However, that costume, the design, I don't know. I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it for Rita. I'm not. But I'm drawing the line in the sand. I see Matty kind of moving around. I'm missing.
As a costume designer and an avid nerd, I think we're going to have a conversation on this, which is, but again, I always like to go in and be like, I was not in the room when the decisions were made. It's none of my business ultimately, but discussing what is an effective versus not effective creative choice for me is always something I enjoy, especially with science fiction, which I think a lot of my comments have to do with the design overall. So I think that will be a large section of where we
Fantastic.
spend the conversation.
I'm ready.
I don't think we need to go too deep into Matty and my own love.
No.
If anyone needs to, go check out the episode that we did on the original Power Rangers movie, wherein we spent our entire post-credits going season by season, discussing every single season of Power Rangers at that point.
And that's why it's a 3-hour I always forget that it's a 3-hour episode.
It's a 1-hour episode with a 2-hour post-credits.
And then we've talked twice on my show about it.
I re-listened to that episode actually this morning while I was rearranging. It's 1.5 hours with a half-hour post-credit.
Okay.
Yourself some credit.
Okay.
I'm sure it was longer because I think we recorded for 4 hours. So I'm sure it got cut down.
I cut that thing down like crazy on that one. But either way, we have had plenty of fun conversations about Power Rangers in general. I will say at the moment, I had tuned back in for a good chunk of the Neo Saban era, and then Ninja Steel came out, and that I haven't had a chance to really catch up with stuff after that because Ninja Steel made me take a pause. But I still love the franchise, and the franchise I think is way more interesting than people give it credit for. The fact that it is still going is fucking mind-blowing. Every year it's more and more insane that it's like, oh, it's still happening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I think we're at peak insanity right now, which I'm sure will get brought up at some point, but like, I think we're about to see a renaissance. I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't want to speak ahead of time. I think we're about to see some renaissance of Power Rangers coming in this new Netflix era, but I am excited to see what happens.
Yeah. Like, fun franchise that people keep doing stuff with is the coolest part about it. And of course, Power Rangers is not an entity unto itself. It, first of all, it's an adaptation of the Super Sentai from Japan, and there's all the stuff that goes into that you can take it all the way back to Japanese Supaida Man if you want. But the point is, it's a franchise that keeps going, and the American iteration has kept going as well. But there's always this nostalgia for that original season of Power Rangers. Like, it was such a phenomenon just nationwide. People were so into it. It inspired movies. It inspired fucking Jingle All the Way. It inspired all kinds of things. And like I said, it keeps going, and people keep having callbacks to it. You can still buy the toys that were sold in association with the season from 1993, like classic Megazord stuff, classic Power Ranger stuff, things that were changed by the time you get to season 2. People still are really invested in. And so it makes sense that the idea was, let's reboot that. They tried kind of before when they did that like off season of Power Rangers where they just like re-edited season 1 with like additional inserts.
Fucking Disney.
And then they've also done the comics, which are all around the same cast of characters at the same period. But this movie's a full reboot, but it's taking the original premise and updating it for now. And I overall like it. The movie is not a success. The movie cost $100 million to make, and they brought in 142. And with Hollywood math, you always double the quote-unquote budget to account for any sort of marketing and promotions and everything else. So they claim that they lost $70 million. Yeah, I believe it. This movie was PG-13, and this movie should not have been PG-13, is my big take on this one. Like, it either should have been PG, so you could get kids in the audience, or leaned more into the PG-13 or gone full R, and like, really gone for it if you wanted to go that way, which I don't think is the right choice. But yeah, I think the choice to have a movie where very quickly characters are saying like, we'll kill you, or where they grab lead pipes to beat someone to death. Just all these moments of like, oh, you're pushing it too far. Like, you're going a little too hard. The aesthetics are a little too dark for what is ostensibly a kid's movie.
Yeah. And it's also very interesting because there's like this weird, there are moments where you get like glimpses of like the original series, which was like very silly, right? Like the putties were very silly. They were very, very silly. And you'll get them like punting someone to the air and then being like, ooh, kind of thing. And you'll get like a moment where it's like, oh, that's the like original series. And now, granted, there's been a lot of Power Rangers, right? And so this movie has to trying to grasp all those fandoms, which I think is part of the issue here, right? It's like trying to please all the people all at once. Like, oh, here's a little bit of your era, this era and this era. But it just feels so weird to have that moment of silliness in a movie where someone grabs a lead pipe or where one of the characters actually dies and is resurrected. And it's weird. There's like tonal shifts all over the place. There's also abrupt shifts between scenes, like in the middle of it, that we're kind of like, I was like, wait, where are we? Like, I would rewind a little bit because like we were like, there was the moment where Billy, he's finding the stone and he basically goes to the Krispy Kreme, and then like they cut to a funeral scene like right away, and there is like the audio, but like my brain was like, whoa, what just happened? Was I not paying attention? Because I have ADD, so I thought I had trailed off, but I had not. That was just an abrupt switch. There's a lot of that in this movie. It's like they were trying to do too much.
Yeah, I think that was for time. Like, this movie's 124 minutes. It's pretty long.
It's too goddamn
for
long.
what it is. And I definitely have some thoughts about how it could be not that long, because it's too long for like a kids team movie. And again, I think this movie should have been leaning more towards a PG kind of crowd there. Speaking of just like missing details, did any of you have trouble tracking Becky G versus Naomi Scott? Like, every now and then a scene would start, and because the movie's fairly dark, there'd be moments where I'm like, wait, which girl is in the scene?
You might just have face blindness.
Well, they're also very different shaped, and Becky G is so much shorter than Naomi that, it was also there is a lot of like dark hair in this movie. That is the one thing where everybody has dark hair except Darcy. So that is, a thing. It is very dark. That wasn't specifically like one of my things where I was like, oh, I'm confused as to who's actually in the scene. There are some scenes where I went, are there actually people in the scene or do we have voiceover right now? Was stuff handled in ADR? But that's also just because I think they were doing that thing where it's like, oh, we want to give some impendingness, so we're just going to give everything a dark tone to it, like even like visual and script wise, but like a lot of the visuals are dark because they had to happen at nighttime. But it's the suspension of disbelief in film that they all now want this like very realistic idea of what nighttime looks like. And that's not why we go to film. It's that thing of like in theater, the moon isn't blue, but in theater, the moon is blue and you use blue light to recreate moonlight because that is expected and it's what shows up. That wasn't necessarily what I had issues with, but...
Well, it wouldn't be like once the scene started, but it would take a second to establish, like when Trini gets attacked by Rita in her room. Even though this was my second time seeing it, like the start of the actual assault, I was like, wait, which girl am I? Oh, okay, wait, it's Trini.
Oh, yes, and those
every
moments,
single
yes,
time
yes,
there
yes,
was like
yes,
a pause of, wait, which one? Oh. And again, most of that was because it was just so dark at all these like spots.
Yeah, there were a lot of dark spots. I think the only time I was kind of confused was when you are first introduced to Trini and she's doing a yoga stance on the mountain. And I think that's just because I'm only seeing her from behind and she has the same kind of loose waves done into her hair as, you know, Naomi's character. And so I'm just like, wait, is that Kim? Like, and then you see Kim jump into water somewhere else. And I'm like, how did she get there? And then I realized later on, because then they show me the face of a totally different girl. I was like, oh, okay, it's a different girl. But it's mostly because their hairstyle is so specifically similar.
Well, it's also because we get a really solid intro to Billy, Jason, and Kimberly, and then we get really questionable intros to Trini and Zach.
Yeah.
So, like,
yes,
that also makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the thing with Trini, like when what you're talking about right there is that we haven't met this person before. And then we get a shot of her and then we immediately cut to a scene with Kim and it's all in this like dark fucking light.
And we had weird hot guy on top of a circus train caboose. Like,
weird hot guy who's a decade older than all of them.
And I don't want to be an asshole, but he did not understand the assignment. I just want to say, like, when it comes to performance, like, he also didn't have a ton of experience in this kind of thing. So it's one of those things, it's like, it's not necessarily his fault, but when it comes to all of them together, you feel like they're pulling Black Ranger along behind everybody else, which is why a lot of the scenes I go, oop, I'm out, oop, I'm out, oop, I'm out.
Yeah, so why don't we start talking about the recast here?
Yes.
I think this is... I have the same basic note about Zach, who's played by Ludi Lin. Like it didn't feel like the character was really well written as anything. Like there's a whole like, oh, I'm crazy, and then I also love my mom, and like I like the mom stuff. Like I thought that was actually really good.
Yes,
but his persona around the friends in general, he just didn't fit in, and like being an outsider could be fine if that was like an arc for him, but they're all outsiders to each other. Like none of them are friends already. So like, well, what's so different about this one? Oh, he doesn't even go to school, which could also have been interesting if that was like a thing that they were like building on, where it's like, well, the actor is 10 years older than the rest of them. Maybe he's actually 10 years older than the rest of them. You could do that if you wanted to, but he's severely underwritten.
But I think that one of the things is like, overall, they're trying to do so much, right? They're trying to rebuild an entire world, make everybody happy, and try to give each and every one of them backstories to the point that these two Rangers, the Black and the Yellow Rangers, their backstories are very diluted and confusing, right? The mom stuff is like good because you get like an actual hold on it, and you only really get a hold on the Black Ranger at the point that he's like expressing what he's going through with his mom, because all you see is like a bunch of pills in a cup and going to his mom and that kind of thing before that. But even like Trini's story, I'm not sure what is happening with her. Like, she possibly did drugs when she hung out with people because her mom she may be LGBTQ, who knows? Like, there's like so much that's just like questioned about that. Like, she doesn't fit in with how her parents want her, but we never really get real answers. And there's not time for it because there's already too much happening in this film for us to get time with. So these two characters, they're just floating in the air. Like, they're there, they're interacting, but they're more devices to move certain plot points along than they are characters.
I think you can also tell that John Gattens, who's the writer, all of the movies that he loves. Also that he was like, 48 years old writing this movie, which again isn't inherently bad. We do have older Power Rangers fans because he and Dean Israelite had familiarity with the franchise. Dean Israelite was a fan, but like you can just tell that I was like from the beginning, I went, oh, I forgot that this is a science fiction breakfast club. Like I forgot that is the linchpin of this movie. Also, I think from the beginning, they want us to sympathize and put ourselves into Jason, and he's so unrelatable. And Kimberly Hart being an actual bitch, like being an evil girl who is now having to repent for her actions, was such a strange choice for this to then also be like, oh, Billy's the weird autistic kid who's like still mourning over the death of his dad. That one feels the most strangely natural to me because Billy has to be the most natural because he's how they discover the coins.
Yeah. I think that the device of it being the Breakfast Club thing is interesting. And it would have been a really good excuse to get them all together very quickly. The fact that they don't, when they all arrive at the quarry together and they didn't all come together, that's where it's starting to get weird when you already had this inserted element that isn't a thing from the show and is honestly from the wrong decade. It's weird. You should have just had Zach and Trini also with them.
Right, because at the end of the movie, they're in detention. Like, they did something bad to be in detention with everyone else. What the fuck? What's this world coming to when your heroes do bad things to just end up in detention?
Mm-hmm.
Well, but especially because that would have been the shorthand for it, because they all have their reasons for why they would have been in that detention. Like, Trini apparently has a history of drug abuse and her parents don't trust her or anything like that. So I could absolutely imagine her being in some sort of Saturday program. And Zach doesn't fucking show up for school. And that's like a thing that happens throughout the whole element. So you could have used that as a, we're all in the room together. Oh, we have to work on an assignment together. And that's how you get them to bond quickly and get like the surface notes for each of them so that we can then have like more exploration later. But they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with two that are kind of mysteries.
Yeah.
Let's move to Billy for a second because I really like Billy. I think we all kind of
Yeah.
Yeah, RJ is the standout of the five.
Agreed.
Oh yeah.
Because he just got it. He really got it. And he's having fun with it. Like you can tell him and Elizabeth and Bill Hader all were having fun with what they were doing. And they understood that there's still going to be some sort of camp to this, whether there was meant to be or not, because Power Rangers is inherently camp. And they kind of understood that, and he's so much fun. And I also love his mom just being like, Jason Scott is here. She's lovely, just because I feel the two of them tied together. And I think he did a nice job of not pandering to the idea of what he thought autism was. Like, he was trying to be as truthful and earnest as he could. I mean, as somebody who's not on the spectrum officially, it's not my place, but it felt natural. It didn't feel like he was pandering like some of the other characters were.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting balance to strike. You know, like there has been a lot of conversation about how like the archetypal nerdy stereotype of past media often is related to characters on the spectrum, and that is just a lack of understanding culturally that we would like pigeonhole them as like, oh, they're the nerds. And so it's interesting to explore that here. I think they do a pretty good job of having it not feel like overwhelming, you know, message or anything to that effect going on with it. And he's fun, he's nice, and you can understand why everyone likes him and like why when he is the one who they potentially lose, why they're all upset and like why he's the unifying factor there. Like, I think it's really good, and it's working with the template of Billy Cranston from the TV show, where you had probably the biggest, strongest person on the team was the one playing the nerd, and having to make that all work. Side by sides of David Yost and Jason David Frank, and you look at their biceps next to each other and you're like, oh, weird.
Yeah. So as someone who has had a history of ping-ponging around the spectrum, and I'm tired of being bounced around and telling me why I'm a liability to those who love me, just watching Billy be super charming and just watching him be the cool guy, I love it.
Yeah, and being like accepted. I think what's nice about the writing of him is, you know, he just kind of like lays it out. He's like, oh yeah, I have autism. And then he's like, well, it was a joke. He's like, yeah, I didn't get it. Like, he's so straightforward. It's a character that is very self-possessed. Like, he explained, like, this is what it is. Okay, I didn't get that. Yes, da-da-da. And then he's the heart of the movie. He's so sweet, and he's so kind. And I think universally, he's, like, the character that people actually do relate to. I think that he's actually the character that you're rooting for. Everyone else, you're like, eh. And that's why the team actually comes together when he goes, because he's the only one that they know that we all like. for sure.
I think it's interesting just kind of looking at who all these actors are. Now, like, everybody now knows Darcy from Stranger Things, where he gave an absolute star turn as Billy. Absolute fantastic performance. Naomi Scott and Becky G were both Disney Channel kids. They had the largest resumes. They'd been working the longest. Largest resumes I use when air quotes. But I think it's interesting that for a movie about the Five Rangers, all of their star power went to their adult alien roles. Bill Hader, Bryan Cranston, and Elizabeth Banks.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that like this was the first big thing that wasn't like kids TV for all of them, pretty much.
This adaptation of kids TV.
But it's one of those things to then make it not kids TV. I think they were trying to keep a casting budget low because this is post Breaking Bad. Elizabeth Banks can do whatever the fuck she wants with her career at this point. And Bill Hader, this is pre-Barry, post SNL. So I'm sure they were expensive. Because then it brings up the question is, does it matter if we know who those actors are? Is it necessarily going to bring you in to see the movie? Or is it going to make you go, no, those aren't those characters?
Yeah, for the leads, I think that it didn't matter. In fact, it was like good to have relatively unknowns. Versus like Bryan Cranston was specifically cast because the trivia factoid that he had been a voice actor on the original show had like circled around the internet, and everyone was like, oh, isn't it funny that fucking monster was voiced by the guy from Breaking Bad? So I get why they were like, all right, we're gonna stunt cast Bryan Cranston. Elizabeth Banks is gonna be told like, just do whatever the fuck you want, have fun. Bill Hader, while there was buzz at the time that he was in it, I don't know if it's necessarily selling the movie on the fact that Bill Hader's in it. I think it was just like,
I thought he was hilarious. Yeah, I think he's great.
I thought Patton Oswalt was just busy, and that's why they casted.
Honestly, 1,000%, 1,000%.
Because actually, when he first said his first line, I thought it was Patton Oswalt, and then I was like, wait, no, it's not. And I was like, oh, it's Bill Hader, and I feel like it's like one or the other. I feel like their voices could sometimes.
And Bill Hader does a great job of getting some of the some of his IIIs actually get pretty close to like the TV show level. And I think they do a really good job in terms of like having this like compromise of the completely absurd robot from the show with a more realistic kind of design.
Well, so they did a lot to kind of make Alpha like Deca from In Space, which I liked, but also make him more Star Wars droidy, which I also appreciated because he really serves such a high function as like the pilot of the ship and like operating system of the ship. That I did appreciate a lot. Also, just because more Alpha is always a good thing. And there was a little bit of dangerousness about Alpha too. Like there's just a few moments with that swirling vortex of a brain, and you're like, oh, Alpha's programmed to do one thing, and that is to protect the power and protect the Zeo Crystal. That is Alpha's goal, which I appreciated. And Bill, if anybody's seen Barry, does nuance danger so well. Like Bill Hader is just a really great actor.
Yeah, I think he was a good choice for the character. While everyone's response when he first shows up is like, stay back or we'll kill you. That's like one of my moments of like, oh, this is too much. He was appropriate in his responses, which is like, how?
Yeah, I loved that. How? It was so wonderful because it's like kind of cocky, but like also like really asking, how would you do that?
Why do we think they settled on Elizabeth Banks? Now, I'm going to preface that question with, I will see anything that she's in because even when it's absolute garbage, I'm looking at you, Pitch Perfect, I will always see something that she's in. Because like, I love like Zack and Miri Make a Porno. Like she really is great. And I love that she didn't give a shit about Power Rangers, but her boys loved it. And so she was like, sure, I'll watch a little, I guess. Sure, I'll do this thing. Do we think she was their first choice? Was she the pull, or was she like the good comedian who they could afford at the time?
I mean, I think she was good casting for the moment when this movie was being made for the type of Rita they were developing. I think that the choice to have Rita be the fallen Green Ranger is honestly a really good idea of lore updates that they're working with. Like, this movie likes Power Rangers lore a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it's a thing I really appreciate about it. And so having the Green Ranger element be tied into her as at least as her starting point, even if she has accrued more power, I think that's really good. And so you need an actor who can be an active physical presence on screen. And so if you're going to have a Rita, you're probably going to go with someone who is young enough that she can be convincingly doing physical stunts, even if a lot of it's CG or with a stunt double. So they needed someone who was in appropriate enough shape that they could be in a tighter uniform for that kind of a thing. And I think they needed an actor who could go pretty big on that one, who could really ham it up.
And she can.
So even if she wasn't the first choice, I can't imagine that she would not have been on the short list of like who would have made a good Rita.
I would love to see the casting notes from this, because this is one where no casting things have leaked. It's never been talked about, like who some of the other options were. I would love to see who else was on that list, just to see what camp they were in, because this isn't really a pitch thing. This was just if Rita was different and she wasn't being the physical one. Because this, something I did appreciate was the fact that it's Rita, and then all of her magic power is what makes like the putties in Goldar. And like, we don't need a Finster, we don't need a Babu, we don't need all those, and Goldar isn't really sentient. If we were going another way and they really wanted to pull in like, oh, let's do another thing of like a well-known actor who's also been in Power Rangers, I was like, Alex Borstein as a Rita would have been fire, because that's a little closer to that like classic Rita, but like do it in a really like sleek new thing. Also, I just think with Elizabeth, I think they decided that no matter who they had, she needed to look like Lady Gaga, because she looks just like the Born This Way. I also feel like they were going for Angelina Jolie, but knew they couldn't afford Angelina Jolie. Was just some of the design directives, I think.
Well, and I just don't think Angelina Jolie would have been Rita Repulsa.
I agree with you.
Agreed.
I agree, but I think they wanted something that was similar to her hard looks in like Maleficent. I think physically they wanted somebody that was as close to her, but had the camp chops.
Yeah, the camp is a thing. You need someone who can really bring it. So that's why I do think Elizabeth Banks is a really good choice there.
I agree 1,000%. I just kind of wanted to ask, but it's also because like 2017 wasn't that long ago. It was only 6 years ago, but it feels 1,000 years. And I can't even remember the other movies that came out that year that weren't Marvel movies. And I don't remember.
Same year was Pitch Perfect 3.
Oh.
So in terms of like where Elizabeth Banks' career was. And 2 years prior was Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. And then she's like gearing up to do Charlie's Angels in 2 years. So,
which she must have really liked working with Naomi, because she cast Naomi as the thing. And I mean, I'm not going to talk shit about people's performance, but Naomi Scott is not where it's at as a performance. I feel like we're not going to see her in much else other than some Hallmark movies. But Case also knows that I am a Kimberly Hart purist. I am a Pink Ranger. Where everybody else is in the Tommy camp, I'm a Kimberly Hart camp. So, you know, I'm going to have an opinion about it.
Well, the great shame is that they didn't use the costumes from the Pink Ranger miniseries that came out from Boom a couple of years back. That it was everyone got powered through the Pink Ranger, but they had their own costume, but with pink trim. So, like, the Black Ranger had black uniform, pink trim, and also this really cool jacket. It was, like, amazing designs. I'm so mad that that's just not the default Power Ranger.
I actually was a little upset with this Pink Ranger costume, because I felt like the pink was a little muted. Like the red was really bright and bold, and yellow was very bold, and like the blue looked good, but like pink kind of felt sad. It didn't feel pink.
They made her fuchsia.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had like a lot of like magentas or maroons instead of pink on in various scenes. And some of that could just be color correction. But like the general aesthetic was they typically wore black clothes that had color pops. Like it would be black with red text for Jason. And Kimberly usually had like a more muted one, like you said, like fuchsia, or like there was a spot where it was like, oh, that's a distinctly maroon top right there.
Yeah, but like honestly, like in the clothing choices, fine. Like not everybody has to dress color coded.
But in the
suit,
yeah.
like why wouldn't I want like a fun, bright pink pop? Give it to me. What? Why?
Well, because this is a tarnished Pink Ranger.
Well,
Oh, God.
like, so
No.
here's the weird thing for me talking about Naomi Scott. So she looks at like a perfect update to Amy Jo Johnson in terms of
Yes,
like face.
1,000%,
If you had told
yes.
me that was her daughter playing the same role, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. And like, I realized that they're not literally that close, but they're just the same type. And she was very buff for this movie, which I appreciated, like the shots of her like breaking shit while wearing a tank top, and like you could see her guns, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. She's gotten in shape for this movie and for other stuff because she's just an actress. In terms of like the look for the part, that part was solid. In terms of how we're going to write the character, oh God, she's a cyberbully who has like destroyed someone's life. Like, whoa.
That was a lot, but it is nice to see somebody being held accountable for that, but not in the correct way. Like, because they still write it like the other girls are the mean girls and Kimberly is the victim. Like,
I know,
that is
right?
how the movie is written.
Doesn't their car get fucked up during the monster fight at the end?
Yeah.
Yep. And she's very happy about it. And she's just like, oops, sorry. And I was like, oh, so you literally have not learned your lesson. Great.
yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
it's like so weird
Thank
because
you.
like when you watch like the first scene and she's just like, oh my God, like I'm so glad we could put this behind us. And then they're mean to her as the viewer. You want to side with her because you feel like she's being bullied and ostracized like off the team. And then later on you learn, oh no, like I actually did this really awful thing by basically sharing someone's nude with someone that they were not authorized to have. Like, wow, bro, like that's That's a crime.
You can tell a man wrote the script. You can tell a man wrote the script because Jason says, oh, there's pictures of all of us just floating around school. And I was like, nope, that's not the answer. I'm sorry, BB. That is not the answer.
Yeah.
No.
And then he's just like, well, just own it.
No.
And then just be the best version of you. It's like, no. Like, bro, you should be like, that's not good. You shouldn't have done that. And he's not. It's so weird. It's such a weird take. It's like someone was like, oh, I'm going to write it like this. So, like, it just shows that, like, all flawed people can be redeemed or something. It's going to be a twist. She's not actually going to be the victim. And it's like, this is already a formula movie. It's okay if you just, like, lean into the formula. It's okay if you let it be a misunderstanding. It's okay if you let the guy be the person who stole it from her phone. Like, this is already a formula. The Power Rangers is a formula movie. Let it be a formula.
Yeah.
Sit in the formula. We don't need twisted turns. We don't need like an M. Night Shyamalan thing in this.
Yeah, I listened to the audio commentary for this movie, and one of the things that the director and screenwriter talked about is how they wanted to subvert more of the traditional superhero tropes and topics therein. And yeah, that was not the right choice. It's kind of like Ang Lee's Hulk. It's trying to outsmart its genre, and you just can't do that with something so entrenched in genre.
For one thing, it's a team movie. You've got 5 characters and you're not spending enough time with any of them anyway. This movie is too long, but also like we don't get enough into some of it. But if the story was Kim learning that she not only did wrong, but that in spite of that, she can be better and that there is hope for people and she has written herself off, like that would be one thing. But she hasn't really written herself off at the beginning of the movie. Like her cutting her hair is like, here's this defiant thing. I'm no longer going to let these people like control me. But that's not what happened. We just don't have the story. Saying that this movie is trying to subvert tropes, I don't think this movie is subverting any tropes. I think this movie is very trope heavy. So we haven't talked yet about Jason Darcy Montgomery in real ways. Like we mentioned his popularity from Stranger Things. I wish he was a bigger dude. Like he doesn't look like a star football player. But aside from that, I'm okay with him. Like I think that his speeches are pretty good. Like the I'll be back here at 4 is pretty good. Like the moments between him and Zordon work fairly well. But where Naomi Scott like looks like a perfect update of Amy Jo Johnson, Austin St. John is just so fucking big. Like you needed a dude who looked like a brick shit house, or you need to lean into how it's not. And like the fact that he's a football player, like they insert that element for this movie and try to like work from there. They even give the fucking dude from The Office, like Pam's boyfriend or fiance from the first couple seasons as his dad, who just looks like a football dad. And like, that's a big story apart for him. Like the fact that he messed up his knee is a big thing for him. And like all of that, like, he just doesn't look like a big football player. And like, that's sort of like a weird dynamic there. But I like his performances overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why they probably made him a quarterback, though. You don't have to be super huge when you're a quarterback.
I mean, Tom Brady's still
Yeah,
big.
but you don't have to be giant. You just have to be fast and
Right.
cunning. And he was big enough. That wasn't like a make or break. Like if you told me he was like a linebacker or something like that, like I'd be like, oh my God, like that guy's definitely not big enough. But like quarterbacks don't need to be huge. So that wasn't a make or break for me.
I also think they probably designed the suits first, and then they knew how sleek and narrow they wanted them to be. And I feel like they probably went with body type over necessarily thinking about the character, because I wanted somebody that was going to make Billy look smaller. I kind of agree with you, Case, because all of them are roughly the same size and roughly the same shape. Like out of suit, that does not make for an interesting Power Rangers team. In suit, we understand they're all stunt actors that are typically shorter or taller than the actual actor playing the role, which is really funny. And it's just kind of something we put up with.
Yeah. Well, especially with Power Rangers, because it's also Japanese footage. So, like, that was a big issue in the first season of Power Rangers, which is that the suit actor for Jason was, like, a skinny Japanese guy versus, like, this American football player type. And it just didn't quite mesh. And then they flipped it in season 2, where Rocky was...
I did love that, though. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did fine. I think that his actual performance as the leader type, I think, worked really well.
Yeah.
I don't think we actually really talked about Becky G, aside from mentioning...
Yeah, we just talked about, like, how the storyline itself just kind of felt muddled. The thing is, like, the only real scene that we have for character development to kind of understand her story is, like, one with her parents and then when she's talking at the campfire. And both of them are kind of open-ended scenes, right? So it's, like, her parents demanding that she share one good thing she did with them that day, and her, like, sharing the truth, which is that she has superpowers now and they don't believe her. And her mom decides that she has to pee in a cup. And so you're like, oh, I guess there was drugs involved in her past, maybe, possibly. Again, open-ended, right? Because we don't really know. Because her parents could just be crazy. Her parents could just be crazy and demand that kind of thing of people.
Yeah, that was my read of it. Like, you're all talking about how she has a drug history. It's like, did she?
Yeah, because, like, that's never confirmed. And then later on, she talks about how her parents are very normal people. They want a normal child that does really normal things. And they don't want to have to worry about her relationships. And then it's like, with your boyfriend? With your girlfriend? And you don't get an answer on that either. Like, it's just like everything's like implied about the control of a home. What are you trying to say? Like what are you giving us, movie? Is this our lesbian hero? Or is she just like a troubled youth? Are her parents just fucking nuts? I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think she's a particularly strong actress. I think you can tell she's trying to do her best after she's predominantly a singer. That's what she does. But like coming from the Disney Channel School of Acting, which is like a long, funny joke kind of thing, I think she did her best. But again, you could tell that she was not used to doing the character work, wasn't really there to do the deep dive on the character. And I think it was really evident because the angst just felt on a very surface level.
I mean, I think also there's not a lot in the script to really tell her what that character development is. And I mean, you can tell her you can probably tell that she didn't really make a decision. Like, she didn't decide either way what was going on with her parents, but the script doesn't tell her and it doesn't tell us. So that's not going to help Disney School of Acting kid get through the script at all. I thought she did an okay job for what she was working with. I think that she was present in all of her scenes. Her and Naomi had good interaction when they were fighting over the piece of food. That was fun. Probably the only bit of like martial arts anything you really will see in this film. Not really, like, because everything else is scenes of people like kicking into an air or imaginary putties that can hurt you.
Well, Alpha shows them how to grapple at one point. That's a martial art.
It's very limited. But yeah, so she's fine. She's fine. And honestly, like, if the script had been tighter and there had been, like, maybe some of these stories either simplified or better explained, the performances across the board from the young people would have been fine enough to get you through, considering what the original and what, like, Power Rangers is, because you don't need it to be amazing. And they would have possibly gotten a chance to visit these characters again and get better. Maybe. Hopefully. Who knows?
Yeah. Because this movie has so much going for it that I do really like about it all. Like, I think that the opening sequence setting up, it's kind of metal that it's like, oh, Zordon called on a meteor strike to kill Rita, and that's why the dinosaurs died out. It's a pretty extreme kind of stance on that one. It is the pop culture sort of science one that people would go for. And it's funny because they say Earth during the Cenozoic era, which is the era after the meteor strike. So it's like, okay. But I feel like every time someone's like, oh, look what this crazy thing that they did to Earth. Like, Jupiter's Ascending has the same moment where it's like, oh, well, last time we were mad at the planet, we wiped out the dinosaurs. And it's like, there have been a lot of mass extinctions, guys.
It's the only one case. The only one.
Well, it is the big one that is actually like an exterior factor as opposed to climate change. So that also is a thing. I love the fact that the Zeo Crystal is a giant plot thread for this. This movie loves Power Rangers canon, and it's all over the goddamn place. I think it's so fucking cool that we've got that in there, and it works really well. So the opening sequence of Zordon calling down the strike, I thought works really well. I think it sets up the stakes pretty well in terms of like how brutal the violence can get. And then the way that it transitions to Jason stealing the cow, or the bull, pardon me, I thought was effective editing. And then, like, the wonder as they're escaping from the cops actually was, like, a pretty good disorienting sequence right there. That triggers this whole movie's, like, issue, which is that it constantly wants you to have intense feelings about car accidents throughout this whole goddamn movie. But particularly this scene where it's like, oh, wow, that's a really graphic depiction of a car accident in a movie that is for children. But I like that as a setup for it. Like, you know, it's a prank enough type of thing where you don't really get angry at Jason too much. Like, he stole the mascot. Ooh, he didn't even do anything bad with it. He just took it into the locker room.
Also, he doesn't rat out any of his other friends. he takes all the responsibility, and that's kind of like what a good leader would do anyway. That's actually pretty good because it leads you to feel like, oh, like he's a person who can take on responsibility. He's a person who like pays for his mistakes, and he's loyal. He could have been like, well, I was here with blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. He doesn't do that. He takes 100% of the responsibility and the burden of that, whether that's fair or not, and whether or not he should still be friends with those people. That's another question. But he has leadership skills. Like, he's basically saying, like, no, I did do this.
Is he friends with them?
I don't think so.
Because they
No.
never see them again.
Never see him again.
Nope.
Never see them again. I think this movie is trying to do what some of Power Rangers did do, which was that like story of the week element of like they're trying to say that it's like, look at all the pressure Jason was put under. And this is the only way he feels he can exert control over his life is to take away all of those things because he couldn't just quit them. He had to literally be removed from them. The same thing with kind of Kimberly. In many ways, I think it's that she felt like she was untouchable and had to be proven that she could fall as far as she could. But I'm not sure the movie they set up was the movie for those to be there. That's like if they were trying to put a very special episode into Euphoria. Like it's one of those things that just doesn't connect together because this is around the time that we got Riverdale. Sabrina was happening. Like Stargirl was even a little dark. Like all these teen-centered shows were getting a little darker, which they were like, oh, this is our gritty Power Rangers, which you can tell from the choice of font at the beginning of the movie. But again, I thought it kind of worked. I just think that there were 4 story writers for this and then 1 screenwriter. So I think when you've got 4 people who are not connected to the franchise in anything, and we're kind of picking buzzwords and things to figuring these things out, of course, when you got 4 people who write Hollywood things, they're going to go archetypey with it. You know, we can say that the actors didn't do a good job or did do a good job, but they only had what was given to them. And this is what I think about all the adults too, because none of them actually matter. Like the teachers, the parents, none of them actually matter to the story, except Zach's mom. I would say Zach's mom matters at the end of the day more than anybody else. But it gets into my pitch a little bit, but I think the way that they chose to use the adults in this that weren't Zordon and Rita and having them as non-recognizable faces might have done more damage. I think they could have gotten more people into seats if they had done a little more in-universe stunt casting, if you know what I mean, which we will get to in my pitch. But it's just things that I was like, it seems like they were kind of missing the mark from the beginning. But also, Dean Israelite, this was his second directing thing ever. He'd done Project Almanac before this. And so that was it, and that was a found footage movie. So yeah, it's one of those things that this seemed like a big thing to be given to people that necessarily didn't have a ton of screenwriting experience, didn't have directing experience. It just seemed like they kind of were set up for failure from the beginning.
Yeah, although I don't think that the failure is necessarily in the finished product as a whole so much as just how it was received. For me, as a 38-year-old man watching this movie, where I find it, it's overly dark at these spots, it doesn't like bother me so much as it seems like weird choices that are like, well, that's not commercial, but it's not going to like prevent me from enjoying the movie. So I think where the movie suffers more is that it gets this reputation that kept people from coming back. Like the box office really dropped off in the second week. You could imagine that when people are like, oh, well, it takes forever to get to where it actually gets exciting in terms of action. I think them all developing superpowers is like kind of a weird element that they inserted here, which this is where I'm saying it's like almost like more tropey than what Power Rangers normally is. The whole them waking up after the car accident and then like, oh, I'm super strong now. Oh, I can climb up walls really quickly. Like, oh, I can jump like super far, or I can fall down like an infinite pit and be okay. Without morphing is too much too soon. But it did have moments where it kind of felt like The Secret World of Alex Mack, and I was like kind of okay there. Like that felt like the right genre, even if it was not what I wanted in my Power Rangers movie. But it gave them an excuse to kind of meander, but be like, see, the power stuff is happening already. I think that's why the movie ended up with a reputation of like, oh, it doesn't even like really start till the third act. The fact that they all kind of come together at the quarry or whatever is a little strange. The fact that it's so like exposed already is also a little strange. But then they like all kind of flee, and there's a good moment there for Jason to sort of establish himself as the leader, where it's like, okay, you drive, I'm going to pull them into the car and everything. And like those are good moments there. The almost death and then like kind of coming back about it, it's not necessary. Like the wake up after the car accident Well, one, how'd they all get there? Even if you're like, oh, they have superpowers now. Did they just like wander home in a fugue state after being in a car accident? Did they die? And when they woke up, they got back up and like, just like walked home. We don't know. It's just sort of played for like, oh, the mystery of the power. As far as I can tell, and maybe I just missed a detail there, as far as I can tell, Rita comes back independently. It was just like, oh, she was eventually going to show up again.
I think the way that it was edited together was their coins activated, then Rita's coin activated.
Yeah.
So it's like the idea that the team now forms together. It's whoever has that coin. She still has her coin. So she was then being activated again. So, and the coin was what kind of revived her. Because they also did that thing of like, oh, well, Jason left his coin in his bedroom and it suddenly showed up in the bathroom with him. It's like Riptide in Percy Jackson, the pen. To me, that's what they were doing, which I guess makes sense.
I think it should have been reversed.
Yeah.
For one thing, like Rita, the way that she comes back, I guess she gets loose from whatever Earth that she was trapped in after 65 million years and is just like floating around in the ocean just in time to be caught up in a fisherman's net. In the show, Rita's being freed is the reason that activates the Power Rangers in the first place. And I think that that makes sense here too, and that doing it in reverse without more of a thing. It's like Billy's just like, oh, I want to go blow up this chunk of rock for no explicit reason aside from just like, oh, well, my dad liked blowing up chunks of rock at a quarry too. I'm going to do something kind of like that.
Well, he finally had a friend.
It just seems like a weird catalyst for this all.
It's what you do with friends. What are you talking about, Case?
I'm just saying, like, I think that we should have gotten some sort of version of the, like, oh, we discovered Rita in the dumpster situation. Don't do it literally the same, but it could have been a fun way to start it all. And then, like, you could start the ticking clock of, okay, shit's going to go down whether the Power Rangers are there or not. Which the movie still does, but it's they find their powers and like, oh, I guess that means Rita's probably going to come back too. Oh, God, we better get this under control because eventually someone bad will show up. It feels like a less intense timetable for them to be working under.
Mm-hmm. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't Zordon say that every planet that has a Zeo crystal has a team of Rangers?
He says that every planet that can support life has a shard of the Zeo crystal in it.
And then each shard has a team of Rangers protecting it. Yes?
I thought the deal was that they had traveled to Earth to protect the Zeo crystal there.
Right. So the idea is that probably from wherever they're coming from, that happens often.
Yeah, which makes me wonder, like, the whole, like, well, so if every planet that has life has a piece of the Zeo crystal, it means that, like, there could be any planet you could go to that has life. Which did make some of the timetable of, like, oh, Earth is now under assault, but, like, the Zeo crystal was going to be there no matter what. It's not like the Power Rangers didn't, like, make it a threat. Their existence isn't attracting nuisances because just the existence of life on the planet was the reason why it was in danger.
It's the Zeo crystal, not the Rangers. The Rangers are there as a caveat of the, much like the villain.
Yeah.
This is another one of those where, again, I sit there and think and go, oh, I think it's too long, but I don't hate it. But then it's as we start pulling that thread, I go, oh, yeah, that thing. Oh, yeah, that thing. Oh, yeah, that thing. Do you all think the training montage was helpful or necessary in this at all? Or did it just lengthen it?
I liked it as a nod to the original show of them fighting putties.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that element in their civilian forms. I thought that was pretty cool, while also making it understandable that they haven't actually confronted the real deals yet. And across the board, I think that they're too powerful unmorphed. So the fact that they're fighting with the putties, like, it doesn't really come up, I think is appropriate and good. I like that it helps establish sort of a reason for Alpha. I think that's all pretty cool. And, like, the general training montage is good stuff because the show had the excuse of them all being martial artists or gymnasts, so we got to see them doing those kind of training stuff, and this movie doesn't have any of that, so this is the only way we're going to get anything like it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I enjoyed it because I like watching people flip around and kick shit, but I think there was one of the scenes where there were a couple of moments where it was, like, too dark and a little muddy. When I was thinking about my pitch, I was wondering, like, is this what I shortened or some of the other stuff? Because maybe it doesn't need to be as long. Mostly, I agree with Case. Only because, yes, we know that Jason is athletic. We don't really know a lot about anyone else. It's not like we see moments of Kim doing cheerleading beforehand. We're not getting that. So it's kind of nice to have a training moment. Probably would cut other things before I cut that.
What might cause people to be bothered by it is that it is explicitly like, at this point in a screenplay, you need to have some sort of fun and game section where they're exploring their abilities. And the fact that they did it as a montage feels kind of like a lazy way to do it. And so I could see people responding negatively to it, but that doesn't change the fact that screenwriting typically does put a scene like that there. Mm-hmm. So if you were to remove it, you'd have to find something to replace it. And I think it's fine. It's just a very simple version of that kind of scene.
Can we talk about Zordon?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know about you all. I actually really liked this idea that Zordon is dangerous and that he only wants the Rangers revived so that he can come back. Now, that I thought was really messy because they make the morphing grid up as you go along because we have the Morphin Masters now. All of this thing is a thing that exists. There's a great TikTok content creator named James, and she talks about some incredible, incredible things and like all lore of Power Rangers. Go find her. She's incredible. But I think they only use the name of the morphing grid because it's something you get access to without really fleshing out about like, oh, when a team's power ignites, it opens the morphing grid to them. So to me, I was like, is it a portal? Is that going to connect us back to Altar or whatever the homeworld is? Like, how is his being in stasis and then can be reborn without a body? Like, I'm a little confused, but I liked that he was kind of self-serving, that he is a bad leader, and that his only purpose was to maybe sacrifice these kids to bring himself back. And I actually really liked that as the linchpin for this Zordon, because in the original, we get very little about Zordon. They don't really care to develop him. They send him away, as a matter of fact, and we get a face-covered person who ends up being the same actress as the villain.
Mm-hmm.
And in the movie, we got a little bit, just because you saw Zordon outside of his tube, but I think that aspect of him actually worked really great in kind of addition to the fact that he was his own Red Ranger. That's something that exists in the Boom comics as well, which is great. But maybe separating that idea of like him being reborn from the morphing grid and then sacrificing that option to resurrect Billy. I really did like and thought it was effective that he has an ulterior motive and isn't telling the kids. And then we get that great scene between him and Jason. I thought that was actually a really effective moment that they put in.
Yeah, like him being the one to call the meteor strike that destroyed the dinosaurs is a very hardcore approach to like the problem solving here. And like building off of that as a character for him, where he's not just like a wise, everything is going to be good kind of mentor, and it's rather like, no, we have to win no matter what kind of stance, I think is an interesting update to the character. And I think that Bryan Cranston does a fine job at being just the head. And I love the look for him as Zordon, the weird pushpin kind of design face for him. And the fact that he moves around so much that it's like disorienting for everyone makes that part, like the ship base setup is such a good update to what the original show version had. And I think those all work really well. Them explaining more, well, what is his goal? Is his goal to come back to stop Rita, or is his goal to come back so that he could be alive? Would be a good thing to sort of clarify. Like if it's just this whole single-minded, I have to complete the mission and like you all are not ready, so I have to come back kind of thing, I think that would make more sense than the way that they kind of half explained it in this movie.
I agree.
You bring up the morphing grid and how it becomes attached. I do like lines that they make in this movie that I don't think they expand enough on. Oh, you have to like be thinking of each other and like connected with each other. Like this movie came out post Pacific Rim, where the whole idea in that for why you've got a pair of people piloting these mechs is that their minds actually have to be linked together, and they actually can't have secrets from each other. They have to be like totally open to each other in order for it to function. And I thought that like that writ large with 5 people is so fucking cool. And they don't quite get there in this movie, but they almost do. And that is one where it'd be really cool to explore. I mean, they say that the reasons why that they're not morphing is that they're keeping stuff from each other. Like they're keeping secrets. They're keeping all the stuff hidden away. And it would be really cool of when they actually all come together, that they are fully mentally linked to each other to the point where it is kind of vulnerable. The 5 of them being totally open and totally exposed and seeing each other's weaknesses and seeing each other's strength and drawing strength from each other's strengths would have been like such a cool thing to like build more on. And that's one of the areas where this movie is almost fixing lore stuff, like having elegant solutions to canon problems that, again, were being made up as they went, but it doesn't quite just push it just enough.
So then I guess I have the question for us. Why does no one come looking for them to realize that they're all dead? And why has no one come to look for the Zeo crystal? This happens in Transformers a lot too, when they talk about the Autobots being locked away and the Decepticons being dead, like locked away for half a millennia or whatever. But that's the hole they don't fill that I think they were going to try to in the sequel. Well, all 5 sequels originally, but this happens with a lot of modern sci-fi. They think just enough about the story they're telling, but not all of those answers, which to me, why didn't someone else come looking to reclaim those coins? Because it's clear the coins can't be destroyed, but they can be reclaimed. So like, why didn't whoever sent Zordon come accept that the team failed their mission and then at least come collect the resources from whatever planet sent them. Because they have a whole full fleet of Zords, which in my mind are all spaceships in some way, shape, or form. Maybe, I don't know. They're not clear. The Zeo crystal is there. It's not going to stop people from coming to claim it. Those were things that I went, are we not going to answer that? We're not going to answer that. It's fine. We don't need to answer that.
Yeah, and that could have been a line, because it could have been like the devastation was so vast that the planet was recorded as dead, and like it's a miracle that life like resumed. Now, the KPG extension event is not the extinction event where that would necessarily happen, but there are some big ones. Going into the Triassic period, there was a big one. There's the Great Dying. There have been plenty of big extinction events in Earth's history where like the majority of life was dead, and it's kind of a miracle that it came back.
Oh, absolutely. But I think that was the thing, is that they were starting to really think about what was happening. But I also think when you've got 4 people coming up with a story, 1 person writing that story, a lot of things are going to get lost in translation. Plus, I guarantee you this went through a heavy boardroom process of like people who are not creatives were getting to call decisions on what was happening, which maybe with that, can we talk design? Because I know Sam and I are probably going to have a lot of things to say about Rita.
Before we do that, I have one thing I want to say, which is I love the Krispy
Kreme thing is hilarious. I love it so much.
I think it's so fucking funny.
It's so funny.
Pure camp.
It's amazing. I think it's such a non-issue. I think it is hilarious. I think Rita being like, Krispy Kreme, it must be an important place, is awesome. I think the shot of her eating a Krispy Kreme donut just before Goldar like bursts through is wonderful.
Also, she's not wrong. It is an important place.
It is.
I will say, when they start digging into the Krispy Kreme to find the Zeo crystal, it's like, oh, that's pretty shallow. I feel like that's just like what their foundation of the building would have been, as opposed to like deeper in the rock. But just in general, I think that like everything should be buried deeper based on like when this all occurred. Like, again, the Krispy Kreme thing is so fucking funny, and I think it's great, and I don't want to lose it because I get that it helped them make money, and I thought it was fine.
It's
and
great.
Like, keep it.
And Krispy Kreme is delicious.
Okay, costumes.
No. Case, I was just going to say, I agree with you, because then I think at the end of this, most of Angel Grove should be completely wrecked. Like, because this is something the Boom comic did, because this is how the Boom comic starts, which is them post Green with Evil, Tommy having to come to terms with the fact that like he killed thousands of people and that like Angel Grove was destroyed. So I think at the end of this, that the Power Rangers get to look out of the Megazord, but then also see that they didn't preserve their community in the way they did, but because their community is going to have to be forever changed. Now that the Power Rangers are there, even though they are giving up their powers at the end of this movie, I agree with you. I think like the center of town should have just been laid to waste. But yeah, design. So friends, what did everyone think of these kind of costumes? And I guess the Zords, because to me, they work together. So I guess costumes and Zords, what do we all think?
I think between this movie and the original 95 movie, it's not that I think these suits look bad. They look fine. It's just that there's this big issue of overthinking a very simple design. The 95 suits, they're apparently like 40 pounds and were terrible to move around in for the actors. These suits are CGI, but if they try to do like more practical fight scenes with them, I imagine we'd have a similar issue. And the same thing with the Megazord. Like, part of the fun of the Zords is seeing how they all come together and make a one giant Megazord. I cannot tell you where the Triceratops ends and the Mastodon begins looking at the Megazord in this movie.
Yeah.
Not disagreeing. Sam.
Well, I needed the pink to be pinker. Overall, like, the movie already is so dark. I think that, like, when the Power Rangers come out, they just need to be vibrant. And it's fine for them to have like a real armored look. I was fine with that. We're post Iron Man. We're post like that kind of things. We're not expecting leotards on people. We're not going back to the early 90s. That's fine. But I would have liked some more vibrant color, especially because we've already spent so much of this movie in darkness. Having said that, Elizabeth Banks' costume is very colorful. It is incredibly bright, and I did enjoy the color, but I hated her hair. I hated it. I thought it looked terrible, and I just thought that it wasn't befitting an amazing warrior. And kind of, I missed the horns. I missed the ridiculous horns. I'm just going to say it. I wanted her to have some sort of headdress. I wanted her to feel more regal. And I'm not saying that it had to be kind of what looked like cone boobs on her head. I don't think that that's necessarily what I needed. I just needed a little more of a nod to the original Rita. I just needed something in the costume. She looked, and I know she didn't move around a lot. Okay, like her costume did not allow for a lot of movement in the past. However, she just looked like my favorite bohemian, maleficent, evil queen. And I needed more in that. And I'm not saying like I needed her to look like Hela or something from like Thor, but I needed a headdress. I needed something better done with her hair. Her hair just looks gross the whole time. It just looks gross.
It's a bad wig.
Yeah, it's a really bad wig. Unnecessary and horrible. I didn't mind the gold on her face. I thought that was kind of cool. And I liked the way that it was chiseled on her face. But overall, yeah, still not crazy about it. I'm fine with her being in pants. I just needed her to feel a little more like regal, especially her head specifically.
I know there's one caveat. There was originally a headpiece design that looked like what the Dragon Zord was supposed to look like, which had a fin in the middle and then 2 raised horns. But she looked too much like Maleficent, in their opinion, with the face pieces. Because that was when Ariana had introduced the ponytail, Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
And so I think they were trying to, but like you can see her lace line because it's really dirty and they didn't blur it out.
Yeah. No ponytail. Like, just leave her hair down. Do something with that. Could have done it in gold.
Oh, I think the gold would have made more sense with green elements. That I agree with you 1,000%.
Right. It should have been gold because, like, if they gave her a headdress in gold, that would have stopped it from looking like Maleficent. And she's already absorbing gold. She's absorbing gold throughout the whole movie. So why wouldn't she just create the headdress to adorn herself? The whole point is that she wants power. Like, why wouldn't she create herself a crown?
My question is, why does she have hair? They didn't explain whether she's not the same alien race as Zordon and the rest of the team, because they're all bald. Or are they kind of pseudo shapeshifters based on their power? Or is that something that the green power gave her that the others didn't? Because there is something clearly different about the green power and how she was able to corrupt it. Or like, does she feed off having the Zeo crystal closer to her? Those were just those things they didn't think about. And in the original film, there was a suit designer and then the costume designer that did everything else. The two, to me, are kind of 2 different things. And Nick, I agree with you 1,000% on the weird bulkiness of the costumes, but like they weren't, because there's something sentient about the power and that they are part of the ship. They're part of the Zords. I thought it should have molted and kind of had that same galaxy shifting that the blue had in the middle and that's on their spine and their hands. Like, to me, I think they forever live in that spine and it's like the Blue Beetle. Like, that is the cost of being a Power Ranger. It is something, or it's the buckle, but it is officially on their body forever until they die. And then it falls off. I feel like it needs to be a symbiotic relationship. So whether it's like the beetle, if it's like the symbiote, if it's like a Yerk from Animorphs that didn't go in their head, but it feels like, again, they had all these almost answers for themselves.
Yeah.
For me, the bodies of the suits are more or less fine. I wish they'd been practical because I think they would have solved a lot of their problems. I hate the helmets. They looked bad in the toys. And I agree with Nick 1,000%. The Zords, you always wait for the Zords. We want cool transforming robots. They were still 2 Michael Bay Transformers. For us having to wait for them to morph till the last 40 minutes and then use the Zords in the last 40 minutes, it was an ultimate letdown, not a payoff to me, just me personally. You know, it's funny with Rita, I don't actually mind the bodysuit. I minded that I could tell that parts of the bodysuit were cheap, like rave wear. That was like molded in with the resin vinyl. That to me was the issue.
In that case, they should have just given her a hoop dress, right? Like,
well, I think doing a digital garment, if the Rangers were CGI, why not give her a digital overlayer that is gold, that moves, like something with her magic and her power? Because then the idea that like Goldar comes out of her and like she connects into Goldar with whether it's like a mist and it's like a force field around her, because she's insanely powerful with the staff. It's off of that green. So the green is the bodysuit and then you build off of it and then it disappears when she's a battle thing. They're just little things that if they were going to spend that money on CGI suits, I would have rather been for her than for the Rangers. But I think Case and I talked about it with the original Mighty Morphin movie. I love the Ninja Zords from the show, but the 3D rendering of them is so bad and it mucked up a really sleek design, where in this, they were going for something that was sleek and it just didn't. It looked so bulky and it made me not want to buy a single toy. The toys, you could tell they were making the cheapest version of the toys possible because nothing communicated over to the toys, which is, again, going back to what Case and Sam and everybody else has said, that like, if you're doing a toy tie-in, this better be a kid's movie. Even all the Marvel movies, the DC movies were generally the ones that get the toys, kids can go see, generally. Now, there are exceptions like Ruth Carter for Black Panther. She'd never done hero stuff, but I think it worked for that because that wasn't the center of the design.
Well, and also, Black Panther was not coming into a new movie from out of the blue. For one thing, Black Panther had already been introduced, and also
and
it's
his
just part
suit
of the MCU.
had already been designed. Yeah. Where with this, I also think Sam brought this up a couple times in case you brought it up as well. Nobody talks about how, one, in design school, they always talk about if you're putting a graphic on a shirt, it needs to be there for a specific and important reason. There is too many words on shirts that don't matter. That is so distracting. And they decided, instead of being like, oh, well, in the original, we know pink is pink because she's in pink all the time, or green is green. And so they subverted. So it's like mostly black with elements of green, mostly black. But when they're going to make a movie this dark and that command center is dark, not everyone can be in black and dark grays. And like Trini, I wanted punk yellow plaid pants that look like Cher Horowitz plaid. I wanted her to be like full punk. And even when they gave Kimberly, she had the awesome bondage bra, like bralette under the tank top. It was so muted. It was like, if you're going to give me elements of those, I was like, just lean into it. Jason should be in red plaid. I want Billy in like jeans and overalls at some point. Like, again, those are things that are from the original, but that style is back. And there's a way to make them look trendy, but also like Zach in all blacks kind of makes sense, but then they had him in white for most of the movie because you couldn't have seen him otherwise. I think having him in baggy, oversized clothes and they're blacks that don't match because he is poor. Like, they didn't look economically at who each of these kids were. And the fact that Kimberly always had a saying on her shirt that was like an Aeropostale shirt, like that, I just found it so distracting.
Yeah, I stopped to read every single time like Kimberly was on screen because she always had like very big text. Like Jason often had text on his shirts that was in red on black, on like a black shirt, but I could barely read it, so it didn't really bother me because I couldn't read it. Versus Kimberly, it was always big and usually it was white.
And then you could tell they put a filter over the movie, which made everything look dirty. And so they all looked dirty because like, I like that the Angel Grove is a poor fishing community, a poorer, but you know Kimberly Hart, her dad is the richest man in town, and you cannot tell me otherwise. And so she's probably slumming it. I don't think they did any pre-pro work thinking about who these characters were. I feel like they went to fast fashion for all of the kids' costumes so that they could spend more money on Rita and then CG budget, I think.
Which is wild that this movie was so expensive, considering like how much of it looks like fairly cheap CG. I think that the movie fails the worst with the Megazord. It looked better on my rewatch than when I saw it in theaters, and that might be that the home version had like additional CG, or it just might be that like I was able to like stop and take it in a little bit more. But I know that the toys looked like fucking dog shit, and like the worst part about this all is that the Megazord from the original show is one of the most elegant designs that Power Rangers and Super Sentai has ever had.
Say it again.
It is an incredible bit of design where you can still clearly see all the spots where each of the individual Zords ends, but at the same time has a cohesive, coherent look to it. I mean, like, Christ, man, there are like so many seasons of Power Rangers where it just looks like a bunch of shit duct taped together and it doesn't fit at all. And then there are seasons that look great, like the Thunder Zords from season 2, like the Die Ranger. Oh my God, they look amazing, but they don't look like the individual Zords anymore. Like the only spots where you can still kind of see it are on the boots. And even then it's like two fairly similar things, just different colored. The original Megazord was such a perfect fusion of all these different elements like coming together. And there was a really cool transformation sequence of it on the show where you could see how they all link together. In this, it's obstructed by fire. Yeah, sure, it's an emotional journey, and I like that part. And I like how the cockpits are exposed. I actually dig that component of it, even if it doesn't make structural sense. But it feels like they're not supposed to come together. It feels like they're just on fire, and then they just kind of like melted into a cohesive thing, when really that should be the ultimate culmination of them being fully linked to each other as one person. To the point on the show, they're making all the same hand gestures as they're like, all Zords, like, attack, or whatever. That element should have been a thematic element here where they are fully linked. They are fully living in the space together inside the Zord. But I feel like they should have had intent for why those came together. Like, why did the Zords, like, link together? If nothing else, we should have seen the T-Rex, like, open up, like, some ports and have the other ones, like, latch onto it. Because, like, that would have been so goddamn cool looking.
Yeah.
And instead, we don't really get it. And the final Zord doesn't really look like any of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a team of 5 coming together. It looks like just a wholly new entity.
I do kind of love how it's implied that this is the first Megazord ever, with reader going like, what?
Mm-hmm.
What's this? How did that happen? And I'm usually really critical of, like, say, the MCU undercutting serious moments with a joke. But I kind of like how, if this is the first time a Megazord's ever been made, like, the Rangers who were only Rangers, like, less than an hour ago, they don't know how to make it move. And they talk it through about, okay, you're the arms, you're the legs, and I'm the chest area. So let's give it one more go.
I will say, I don't mind that part.
Yeah. I like the trip.
The trip was fine. Them talking out who's doing what and who's, like, tied to it all. I think that's still fine, but I feel like it should be, okay, wait, which pack of nerves am I controlling right here? Like, and they're all kind of linked, but at the same time, like, each one's kind of devoting its attention to spots.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like at this point in the movie, though, we just don't have time for that. Like, we have enough time, basically, for them to be like, oh, crap, we're doing this together. Whoa, okay, now we've got it. Like, that's like, because this movie's so long.
And that's fine. I'm not really saying that the issue was, like, how they were acting while they were controlling it. I think the design for the Megazord itself sucks. And the fact that we didn't get, like, a good transformation sequence for it all kind of sucks. And, like, those are things that we're coming here for. Like, the reasons why Transformers are cool is not because they're both cars and robots. It's that we see them go between the two of them.
Hey, listen, as a person who loves Voltron, like, yeah, a good transformation is always, and a joining is always my jam.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
so
it would have been great.
That, I think, is the worst sin of this movie. That the Megazord itself, the thing that should be, like, the culmination of this whole movie, is kind of fucking boring looking. That, I think, bothers me. The suits for the Rangers bother me less. The Rangers in general, I think we keep on all saying it's fine, and I think that's really true. There's some interesting stuff going on with, like, the fabric on the hands that I wish more of the suit was, with, like, armor pieces to it. And I think it could have been really interesting if they wanted to play up that they have all this energy kind of coming off of them, either through the coins or whatever, and had, like, glowing components to their bodies that are of the appropriate color for which Ranger they are. I think you could have really streamlined it. It's too busy. It looks like clearly that this is a movie coming out in the wake of Transformers and Iron Man, like, way too much so, and it looks like completely impractical. But it's fine for the most part. I also agree that the pink is too muted, but that's just this movie's issue in general.
I will say that I was not disappointed when the suits first came up in the movie proper. In fact, I kind of got chills when Jason finally said it's morphin' time.
Oh, me too.
What was a letdown was when they're fighting in the ravine and it just switches over to second unit CGI pre-choreographed. It's like, that's not what I come to Power Rangers for.
Yeah. They then gave us a moment with them fighting up on land, and that's good that we're getting it, but it's all so much at the end of this movie that, like, okay, we get a little bit of a putty fight in suits, and then let's immediately go get the Zords. And then I like that we spend a lot of time with the Zords. And the Zords, there are a lot of things I really like about it. They look kind of like the Zoids stuff from the 90s, like the early CG cel-shaded cartoon. Like, I like the T-Rex, for example. I think that one's overall pretty good. I think that the decision to have some of the ones that are not dinosaurs look more like animals, just in general, and not, like, really specific ones, you lose out on some of the flavor of it. Like, the Mastodon one has 6 limbs and isn't really a Mastodon. Like, so you lose some flavor there. But overall, like, I like them okay, but it would have been fun if they, like, felt more like they could, like, link together and be a thing.
Can I say, I feel like this was the moment when they say the Zords take the form of the strongest thing on the planet that it's on at the time. And there was that great shot that I feel like we all remember from the original Lord Zed thing where he trashes the Dinozords and they all fall into the fire chasm and are destroyed forever.
Yeah.
This was very reminiscent about that. Wouldn't that have been the moment for there to be, like, a shockwave, like a rainbow shockwave, and then you have 5 new Animal Zords come up out that then cement your sequel to take into your sequel, because those were Zordon's team. This is now Jason's team.
Yeah.
That could have just been that moment. And then you see them crawl up and then there's that flash of light and then, like, the lava comes up and then we get the Megazord. Like, because then it feels like the Zords have reformed for Jason's team to be their pilots. Now, it's like in Voltron, Sam brought up, especially in the new DreamWorks one, each lion pilots differently because they are a sentient, emotional being themselves, and their pilot not anyone can just pilot a lion. So it's the same thing with like, just because they have the coin doesn't mean they can necessarily pilot correctly, because that Zord is programmed into whoever that previous pilot was.
So maybe the Zords didn't look so much like dinosaurs before, but then they come out looking like dinosaurs, saber-tooth tiger, etc. Or they look like something new.
I was going to say something new because just that way that gives us, even if it is like the lion, the like you tweak it a little, or they set up the Zeo, maybe it's the bull, it's the lion, it's the falcon, and then not robots, but like if they're tweaking, because they said the next place we were moving towards was Zeo. The Zeo power set was the next movie that they were going to do, like 2 movies with this power set and then move into Zeo, because that's what they needed to do. They were going to move power sets as needed, because this was supposed to be the first of 6 movies to go all the way through like the idea of like Lost Galaxy and alien powers and other teams of Rangers and those things. So it could have just been that moment, because at that point, then you've got 2 different Megazords. You've got 2 different sets of Zords you can sell, and their suits don't have to change at all. Like truly, because they barely look like what they were supposed to look like anyway. Like you can kind of see Pterodactyl, you can kind of see Tyrannosaurus, because I'm like, okay, so the Tyrannosaurus is the only one that looks like what it's supposed to, other than like the fangs on the saber-tooth tiger. I love the sleek jet moment for Kimberly, but like, again, I feel like that's where a lot of the design stuff should have happened. And I feel like they were like, oh yeah, we're going to come back to the Zords. Yeah, we're coming back to the Zords. Yeah, we'll get back. Our art will get back to us. We'll figure this out. And then they got to a point they went, well, shit, so much happens in pre-pro, but we need to know what this looks like now. And I'm not sure that happened with them.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if the Zords design had not been finalized even when the movie was done being shot.
I agree.
That makes sense.
1,000%.
Yeah. The thought about the Zords changing their form to the next wave of whatever that would be is that we haven't seen the Megazord yet at that point. So we kind of would need that. So I do think if they set it up earlier where they looked like alien type of life forms, and then they like emulated terrestrial ones.
Maybe the Megazord always looks the same. Like maybe that Megazord form always looks the same.
Well, but then that's so fucking boring.
I know. I agree with you, but I feel like that's what they would tell you is like, well, it always is going to look the same. It's the same thing.
Because I could get with like a headcanon that, okay, no one has ever created a Megazord before. Not that they never had the capabilities, but just no one was ever good enough at using their Zord and as intimately linked with each other. You could always have that kind of progression. But I do think that the design of the Megazord does rely on it having like a distinct look to it that like looks like it's component pieces, but it's more than the sum of its parts.
I agree.
I will say what we were saying about Rita, I agree that I think her design, she should have had like base combat form as the Green Ranger stuff, and then like having gold accoutrement to really like flesh it out. And being linked to Goldar would be kind of cool. I think we all kind of just agree that that would have been a fun way of doing it, and having her be more witchy and so forth when she's like got all this gold like emanating off of her and maybe growing into Goldar. On that note, Goldar I overall like, except I don't like that it's Goldar. Like it, like it feels like the kind of monsters that Rita throws out like all the time. But Goldar was a distinct personality, and I get that his name is Goldar, and that being like, okay, I'm going to gather gold so that I can make my golem of gold and use it to attack things. Is like, okay, I see why that made sense from a screenwriting perspective, but it does mean that we don't have the character, like a thing that had a character in the show, as opposed to every episode had a monster that was like literally formed from clay. And so I kind of don't appreciate the fact that they used that name, even though I see why they would use that name. Because like the goopiness of it all, I thought that was kind of cool. It reminded me of the reboot episode that was a parody of Power Rangers, you know, when like the Nulls, all the like slimy things came together and they had to like fight it with a mech. So there were like elements of where this movie felt more like a commentary on a parody than a commentary on the source. But Goldar I thought was fine. And again, like once he's up and running, it's like, okay, it's fine. Like he's very big compared to the Zords. Like I don't know how their mask got that big when they came together, because like that sizing was like, oh, they're much smaller. They even all combined, I don't think they would be as big as he is.
Are we ready for pitches? I feel like we should take a break and then go to pitches, because we've talked extensively and we've almost crossed into pitch territory a couple of times.
Several times.
So I think we need to refocus and maybe take a break.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't Screen Beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans!
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
You will be mine, Aurora.
And we're back. All right, so we have kvetched about this movie. We've also said a lot of stuff we like, because I think this movie just generally is like, it's pretty good. But because it's from a franchise that we all have like really strong feelings about, we have a lot to say. So, Nick and Matty, but especially Nick, because this is your first time on the show, we have one hard rule, which is I am not allowed to go before Sam. We have a general ethos, which is like whatever we're speculating on should be feasible. Nick, since it's your first time here, who would you like to have go first, noting that I can't go before Sam?
I'm honestly not sure. I don't want to step on anyone else's toes.
I mean, like, this should be collaborative. So if you want to go first and then we can just build off of that, that's totally fine. So
okay.
This is your show right now.
Yeah.
Go.
Do it.
Run!
All right. So I approached this from starting at pre-production for the movie. So I'm thinking, don't over-design the suits. Part of the appeal for Power Rangers, at least for me, is that these are actual people doing martial arts. So something that looks more, not spandex, but still like breathable and comfortable to move around in.
Yeah, I think Dr. K would have a thing to say.
I literally was just going to yell, they're not spandex. But I was like, I'm not going to be that person.
So yeah, more faithful suits that are good to move around and fight in. I didn't mind the dark look for like selling that it kind of sucks to be a teenager in Angel Grove in 2017. I totally understand, but when we get more into like the Power Ranger stuff, there should not be as many harsh shadows. It should be stepping out from sepia tone into the land of Oz, like when we get to the command ship. Try and play more with the idea that this is out of this world, so we're going to do a slightly different tone and not super dour and super serious, because it's Power Rangers and it's bright and colorful.
Yes, there are 5 of you of different colors. 5 colorful teens.
Different colors, different kids, different colored kids.
Yes,
Yeah, I
that's
love
that's
it.
line. Thank you.
So good. So good.
How much money do you think was dropped out to have Bryan Cranston in the movie?
A
That's
lot.
a good question. I mean,
All right, because I'm wondering,
let's say hypothetically you have 60 million to play with, and then 40 was like for some of the stunt casting.
so I'm wondering if you could swap Cranston for someone who was on Power Rangers but has like a SAG card now, like Eka Darville. Make good use of the money, you know? Honestly, if I would actually wouldn't mind seeing Jason David Frank playing Zordon. Like come around full circle.
I mean, again, like in Dino Thunder, he was already playing the Zordon of the team.
Yeah.
I think they also needed to sell it to a larger audience, I think was the only probably reason for that. But you're tapping into something that I also have in my pitch, so I'm excited to hear what else you have to say about this.
But I'm hearing you, because like the movie ultimately looks cheap, which is crazy when it was $100 million.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I stick mainly with the script we got. I kind of want to start off with like a sort of Dune-esque opening with Zordon narrating about how it's been 65 million years since the last great battle between good and evil. I'm all right with him being the Red Ranger. I kind of want to go back to the Eltarian Sage and like have him dressed in like whites. Like his wizard staff has like a brachiosaur head, like kind of leaning at future stuff there.
Are you going to tell me that you're going to have Titanus show up in this? Or
Oh, fuck yeah. Fuck
I'm telling
yeah,
you
fuck
that
yeah.
I'm seeding Titanus for if there were ever a future movie for this, and that Zordon is the wielder of the white light. So, prologue is fine. After the fight with Zordon and Rita and maybe somebody else, we don't know, we cut to Jason and his dad driving up to the Angel Grove Youth Bar. I know they did scouting. I wonder if we can switch around the school or maybe build some sets to make it more look like the juice bar from the show, because I feel like these kids need a place, a home away from home. And we get more about what Jason's dad's deal is. Like, he's not mad that Jason stole the rival football team's mascot, but this is more for a water boy to do, not the quarterback. What were you thinking? Like, Jason still doesn't give away who it was, but we'll see them very soon. And he has the ankle bracelet and the knee brace, so he's going to the youth center to get physical therapy. And it's there where he meets up with old childhood friend Zach Taylor. Those introductions in the movie we got were kind of sweaty, so I want to tie it back to something more familiar, and pulling from some cut content from the movie is that he's a dancer and he posts videos of him dancing on YouTube to try and go viral, basically. And this is where I bring in two characters who feel like they're cornerstones of Power Rangers.
I know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. So in the movie we got, there was a Mr. Colt Wallace, who was, again, Billy's main bully. And there was Jason's friend Damo, the kid who milked the cow they stole. In this pitch, they're just Bulk and Skull.
Yeah, and that works as like football nicknames, for example. Like your left tackle is Bulk. Yeah, that makes sense.
I like it.
Yeah, and Skull was the water boy, like I mentioned. In this version, I kind of visioned them as like YouTube pranksters, because that's just feels like something Bulk and Skull of 2017 would do. So once Jason deals with those guys, like Billy and Trini, are like, oh, wow, you're Jason Scott. You're so cool. And I want to keep Billy as on the spectrum and like a kind of reinvention of where the thing where Trini re-explains his technobabble. Right now, they're kind of only friends who hang out because they're kind of outcasts, but for room for growth later on. And like Billy appreciates what she's doing, but at sometimes it can feel kind of condescending. Billy's like, hey, if you want me to remove that ankle bracelet, we just need your car, because my dad was on the verge of finding something in the mines, and it's been a while since I've been there, and I really want to finish his work. So that's how we get Jason, Billy, and Trini together. And Zach kind of tags along because, like, hey, I want to catch up on lost time. And we still get Kimberly's introduction. But the problem with the core scene in the movie we got is that 3 characters just happen to be there. I find it easier to believe when there's just one character who happens to be there, and that character is Kimberly. I'm making her the sole outsider among the outsiders kind of role here. So when we do get to the quarry, when they blast open the coins, they also awaken something else. They awaken Rita's faithful servant, Goldar, because I'm putting more action in this movie. I'm front loading it with more action here. And we need a kind of humanoid presence, but we also can't introduce Rita too quickly. Like, Rita is where the movie shifts and things start to go bad. So Goldar has like a bunch of pebbles that he plants into the ground, and it grows out putties. And we get our first fight scene, and Billy is the first one to morph. That's right. They actually can morph early on in here. And like eventually they're all morphed, and they're unskilled, but they do pack a punch, and Goldar is still weakened from waking up so soon. But because the Rangers have morphed, that awakens Rita from the sea. And at first, like in the movie we got, they all wake up at home. It's like, wait, wasn't I outside? Did I just dream that? And then they all show up at the youth center again. Imagine this is like spring break or something. And Billy's like, hey guys, you all kind of blanked out last night, but I was studying the coin we got here, and I think there's something bigger underneath the quarry. So that's how we all go back to the quarry, and they jump over the ravine, they jump in to the water. Do want to keep the Trini Kimberly scene where one of them's trying to convince the other to jump in with them, but I want it reversed. I want Trini trying to convince Kimberly to jump in, because we might as well. And so they all jump into the ravine, and they're exploring the ship. And I do want the ship to be more colorful. it should be awe-inspiring to be inside a spaceship. And they get into a fight with Alpha, like usual. But then they start morphing. And it's like, oh, wow, you're not just intruders, are you? And he takes them to Zordon. So we get this same spiel about your Power Rangers. The person you fought was Goldar. He's the loyal servant of Rita. And we've got to train you up. You got to learn how to fight. Right now, you're just punching wildly. The training montage I thought was fine. I thought it would also be fun to see them like trying to do good deeds around the town in their ranger garb, because Goldar's in hiding at this point. Eventually, Goldar, he either robs someone or kills someone for their gold. People are concerned because, like, what did I catch on my phone footage? And I want Jason to try and take charge and morph into his ranger forms, like trying to explain the situation, but that just makes more distrust. And then Bulk and Skull are like, you just take your problems and get them out of here. Jason's trying to deflate the situation, but he comes off as aggressive, and Bulk like throws himself around in front of Skull to prevent him from being hit. And that kind of causes Jason to like stop. And it's like, okay, guys, like it was fun training at the youth center, figuring out our powers for ourselves, but I think we do need direct leadership under Zordon. That's when they go back to the ship and they start more rigorous training, and they fight with Alpha 5 again. And it's like, oh, no. You guys need to learn how to use your weapons, because my rewrite here. The problem isn't that they can morph. It's just that they're not utilizing their power correctly, and they won't be able to utilize it until they can summon their power weapons, like the lance, the axe, the sword, because that's how the Zords will recognize them as their masters. So Alpha breaks out Alphas 1 through 4, and they're all training partners utilizing what would be their power weapons to try and learn how to use it and try to be better Rangers, essentially. So Billy is able to summon his lance at a certain point, but he can't redo it. And they go have their time on the fireplace. And I guess this is as good as time as any to talk about what the Rangers' deal is, what each of their deals are. So Zach and Billy are basically the same as the movie we got. I put more focus on Zach trying to put himself out there on YouTube and trying to go viral, because he thinks if he can do something with that, he can start making money to help out his mom.
Yeah, God, this movie came out just a little too soon for TikTok, and that would have been
Yeah.
the perfect thing for the...
Yeah, it's like 2 years
dancing
before
Zach.
TikTok.
Yeah, instead of hip-hop keto, he learns TikTok keto.
I kind of love that too much.
Well, because that's such a nice callback to the original show, too.
Yeah, for the longest time in the producing of this pitch, I toyed around with Zach and Billy swapping their Ranger colors, because I can't remember who pointed it out for me, but I remember thinking it kind of sucks that Billy, the autistic representation of the Rangers, is associated with the color of the awful autism organization that I will not be named.
Yeah. But I feel like they made that change because they didn't want him associated with black, because one of the things that is always said about the original is that they made the Black Ranger black, the Asian girl yellow, and they were like, that's right on the nose. And so, but you're right, this is an unfortunate other side effect with blue.
So we get into Trini's deal. Basically, Trini's grandparents came over in a time. They're basically refugees. So they got in, and that kind of raises anxiety for her mom, because like, oh, I don't want my parents, your grandparents, to be taken away. And that kind of F's up Trini and how she relates to people. But she understands it's wrong, and she's trying to appreciate her mom more, and also trying to appreciate her friends more, essentially. And like this movie came out like 1 week after Logan. I feel like you could put that in here and not be too out of place. So we get to Jason talking. This is where we actually see the flashback scene of him and Skull stealing the rival football team's mascot, which I'm going to call Stone Canyon, because I also like Power Rangers lore. And Jason told himself that, I was just looking out for him. He seemed scared. Like, that was just a lie he told himself. He was just trying to get in trouble because he wanted to be off the football team and he wanted to stick it to his dad, essentially. But Skull thought that Jason was going to take him down with him, so he called Bulk to pick him up early, and that left Jason with the cops. And that's where you get the dialogue between Jason and Kim about how, oh, you did a bad thing, but you're not a bad person, but it actually makes sense and is not head scratching. And then everyone's turning towards Kim, but she's like just really embarrassed and it's too personal for her. So they kind of end it there. Because another thing about the movie we got is that Kim talks about how, I think I'm the reason why we can't morph. So I'm actually digging into that here more. So she gets the scene with Rita, where Rita invades her room, wondering if that's more of like a dream, essentially. Because like, hey, we're both the outcasts and no one cared about us. Like, I really want to hammer home that Zordon's team were soldiers, whereas this team is friends. And that's kind of why going in with duplicitous Zordon we have here, that kind of shaped Rita. So then we cut to the fight at the docks, where first the Rangers, they get a hint about Goldar being there, but then they realize that it's a trap when Rita shows up. And we get the scene where, oh, it's under Krispy Kreme or Ernie's Juice Bar, etc. And Billy's drowning, but Rita doesn't free them. She just leaves them to be. And throughout this version of the movie, like Bulk and Skull have had like a subplot where there's like, hey, those 5 guys don't hang out usually. What's going on with them? And they actually catch the fight with Rita on camera, and they're kind of mortified. But at the same time, once Rita and Goldar leave, Bulk jumps in to untie everybody, and Skull jumps in to save Billy. So we get to the bit where they bring Billy's body back. Like, they're thinking if they place their coins on him, he'll come back to life, but nothing's happened. And here's where we get Kimberly talking about her deal, because she's the reason we can't summon our power weapons here. Kimberly was trying to come out to her best friend, who was a girl, and trying to get her to break up with her friend, but that just caused her to lose all social standards, and that emotional honesty is what causes the morphing grid to fully coalesce and Zordon to bring Billy back to life. Third act plays out more or less the same, only when Rita sends her now numerous putties down. Another running bit I've had is that Alpha talks about how great it is that we have a teleporter and we can teleport you all around, but it always is not working when they want it to. But because they've accessed the morphing grid, that repaired the ship, so now they can teleport. So we get to see the Rangers teleport down into the quarry holding their power weapons and to fight off the petties, and they look good doing it. So the Rangers fight Goldar. They're trying to do more to help the city. Like, instead of Jason saving his dad, he saves Skull and Bulk trapped in a car. And like, he actually puts his visor down. It's like, hey, it's all right. I got you guys. And Alphas 1 through 5 are also doing first responding, basically, kind of like the Superman robots from Superman versus the Elite, trying to mitigate damage. And after they slap Rita into space, and Bulk and Skull are talking amongst themselves, like, they heard Rita talk about the morphing grid. So what do we call these guys? And they're like, Mega Morphin Power Rangers. No, that doesn't work. Macho Morphin Power Rangers. No, that doesn't work. Then they look to each other, smash cut to maybe 6 months or a year later, and they've turned their prankster YouTube channel into, like, they basically become what they are in the Boom comics, where they're like a Power Rangers news YouTube station. And they talk about how the Power Rangers helped rebuild the city. Zordon says that he underestimated them. It's like, you're better than my team. Taking from like the comics, where the comic Zordon talked about his team he formed in 1969. Those were all specialized people with a specific set of skills, but they weren't friends. And that's kind of why 3 out of 5 of them died. Whereas with these Rangers, it's better to take people who are genuine friends and who would die for each other, and then teach them the skills they need to be Rangers later on. And so I think we have 3, maybe 4 post-credit scenes. One's where like the Rangers buy their Krispy Kreme color-coordinated donuts.
Delicious.
2 is where like we talked about how Billy's van in the original movie got smashed by a train. In this version, Jason's car got smashed by putties. Like I'm thinking Billy can use, like throughout the movie, Billy is studying the command ship's tech to fix everything, and he makes the rad bug. Post-credit 3 is Rita waking up in space and like making herself be able to breathe with her magic. It's like, I guess I'll have to start again, but I won't have to start from scratch. And she causes the Moon Palace to rise up. And the post-credit scene 4 is basically a recreation of the first scene of Green with Evil, where Jason, because of his ranger activities, is moving away from football to more martial arts because it fits him better, where he faces off against Tommy Oliver. I think I got through the bulk of it.
Yeah. I like that. There's a lot of like similar notes. I think we can identify a lot of the same like weaknesses in the movie that we got. So there's definitely a lot of shared points for what I was kind of thinking. I love having Goldar be the thing that's sort of like out there as an entity.
He's the heavy.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I mean, it's nice in the movie that we got that like it all is stemming from Rita, but like having sentient followers for her makes sense to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that is kind of the tone problem with this movie is that for as serious and grounded as they want this movie to be, they still call her Rita Repulsa.
Right? There's so many things that are like, this is just like a little too far for the serious movie that you're trying to make.
Yeah. Like, honestly, either lean into more of the campiness and have Rita Repulsa say that, be her name, or if you are going to be more serious, like, I kind of like what this fan production did, Power Rangers, the audio drama, where she was named Rita Bandora, because that's a name at least.
Yeah, and regarding tone, I will say that I think that fan productions, parodies, things that are playing in a space but isn't necessarily like the canon space or the flagship space, they're allowed to go further afield. Like they can go darker if they want to.
Yeah.
I will say I did enjoy this movie a little bit more than Power/Rangers, and it kind of highlights why, for me, Power/Rangers was kind of a poor attempt at satire, because Power/Rangers did not have product placement in it. It was the one thing that was missing.
But Nick, I think you hit on a lot of really good points here. I fucking love your Alphas 1 through 4 bit right there.
Yeah.
I think that is just...
For the movie itself, they'd probably like just pitch shift Bill Hader, but I would want to bring back the previous Alpha voices, like Richard Steven Horowitz, Wendy Lee, like maybe retool the Alpha 6 Yo 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 into more of a Stallone impression.
So I like all that, and I think we're in similar spaces in terms of like, yeah, get some action earlier, like speed up some of the stuff, like have some more character development. And you know what? I think we all at least at some point thought, hey, should some of these be flashbacks? Like the stealing the cow or the opening or any of that? Like, should we open in media res to speed up this whole process? Because the movie ended up being over 2 hours, and that's too long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the Megazord obviously looks a little bit more like the traditional Megazord.
Yeah, or at the very least, like looks like it is the 5 robots coming together.
I watched Shin Ultraman, and watching how the fights in that go down is like, I'm really sick of American monster movies being slave to realism. Is like, big thing, go slow. It's like, nah, just have it move fast and it creates shockwaves around the area. It's fine. Mm-hmm. They're operated by the morphing grid. Regular physics doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the MacGuffin for it all. Nick, thank you for bringing that one. Who would you like to have go next?
All right. Heads is Matty. Tails is Sam. All right, it's Tails. So
Woohoo!
Sam.
Mine is going to be relatively short because I think I want this movie to be shorter because I want kids to be able to sit through it. And so I feel like we need to just like tighten things up. And actually, I really like, Nick, that you started with like a kind of overarching like Zordon just kind of speaking the history because we can kind of get into it. I also think like, although the prank was cool to kind of see, we can shorten that up. So I kind of like the idea of Dad just talking it out, driving him somewhere, being like, you really messed up, kid. You know, kind of like your knees messed up, that kind of thing. I'm kind of still okay with him going to detention. I'm kind of still okay with the Breakfast Club of it all. I don't really mind that. I actually think that at least 4 of the characters should be there. And I think it should be Trini, Kim, Billy, and of course, our Red Ranger. And they should be there. And then I'm fine with Zach being at the quarry. However, I think that Zach should be actually working the quarry. This is why he hasn't gone to school. And he did know Jason before. I actually was like, oh, yeah, I actually kind of thought that would be fun. Like, these are friends that have fallen out because Zach has stopped going to school regularly because he's got an illegal evening to night job at the quarry so he can help his mom pay some bills, and he's kind of disappeared from everybody's life and no one knows why. And so when he sees them snooping about, kind of coming there to do Billy's bidding, I think that he's there to kind of be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you guys can't be here. Like, this is not. So I'm switching around his personality because I'm not going to have him be like, yeah, all the bad things. Like, I'm going to have him like literally be like, no, like, I work here. Like, you have to go. I mean, listen, someone who's a caretaker can also, outside of their caretaking roles, can feel like they want to be rebellious. But I think, in general, being that young, being a child of an immigrant, being someone who's taking care of a dying parent, he's probably more responsible than your average high schooler, even though he's not going to high school. So I'm going to change up his personality a little bit and just have him be like, you guys need to leave. And then the reason Billy wants to go so badly, I'm going to change that a little bit. It's not just because of his dad. It's because with his dad's obsession, so his dad had an obsession about something that was in that quarry. And earlier that day, there's going to be an explosion, and that explosion is going to release Rita into the stream, which is going to take her out to the sea. So basically, the quarry itself dug too deep. It's kind of like a Helm's Deep thing, and let Rita go. They released Rita, and this is kind of what starts it. So Billy has a feeling that something has happened because maybe he's got some sort of program that his dad has already set up. I don't know. We'll work out the details. And he figures out that something's wrong, and they've got to go to the quarry. And he's convinced these 3 people he's met in detention that they've got to go with him. And so they go. They actually find everything the way that they do. Zach is there telling them to leave, but he gets like pulled into everything. And that's how they join their team. And then the tension going on from there is just like, maybe Jason and Zach were best friends before and they had a falling out because their lives were different. And, those differences led them to where they are now. And so then you've got a little more interesting dynamics within the friend group. Also, Kim's thing, she's not fully guilty. Or she has to learn a lesson, but she doesn't. And we don't have time for that. So it just has to be a misunderstanding between friends. And it can't be like revenge porn or something that bad. It's got to be like, it can be bullying, but I think we got to keep it nicer for the children. More color everywhere. God damn it. More color everywhere throughout this film. And either make Rita bald or just let her be blonde. Let her have her real hair, because that wig is awful, and I hated it, and it was the worst part of the movie. Everything else, the hair was the worst part of the movie. No more wigs. No more wigs.
No wigs.
And then everything else can proceed as it proceeded. That's fine, as long as we shorten most things up. Make a decision about Trini's life, okay? She either got into drugs or she's gay. Fuck it, she's gay. In my version, she's just fucking gay and her parents are controlling and that's it.
Yeah, like you might as well lean into it because there were a lot of people who were like, oh, the Yellow Ranger's gay now at the time. And it's just like hinted at in the movie that we got. So people are going to reactionary politics is going to play a part regardless just by hinting at it. So you might as well just go all in.
Yeah. And she can become friends with Billy just because he just is so straightforward. Right? Because she's always trying to hide herself. And he's a person that's just straightforward. And she just likes that. He doesn't care about differences, And maybe have her be the person that tells the bully to shut the fuck up in the first thing. And I understand we want the Red Ranger to be alpha, but, let's give some leading and autonomy to some of our female characters and give her a couple of moments in there, with her attitude and that kind of thing. Have her, be the initial person that says something to the bully and have the bully do something and then have Jason just come over and slap him and she could be like, did you just slap him? And just being like, yeah. And just kind of he just slapped him. And just have Billy, yeah, he did just slap him. That is a fact. And kind of just like have them bond in that way. And you can still have Kim meet them in the woods, and you can still have your moment of her jumping in the water, because we all know that's selling tickets. So we get it, Hollywood. But just make it all shorter. And make it a lot more fun. And let Elizabeth Banks go even more, go even further. She's awesome. She's amazing. But fucking take that wig off her head. It is not working. And fix her costume. And give her a crown. I'm done.
Give her a crown.
She's a queen. Give her an emerald. Really play up that
is a fucking queen.
Green Ranger bit. All right, I'm done. Maddie, Case. Oh wait, Nick, flip. See who goes next.
All right, heads Maddie, tails Case. Heads Maddie.
So Nick had a lot similar to me. So I think from the beginning, I do want to see something a little more sweeping. I want to actually see what's happening. I want there to allude that it's a battle of armies, that Rita turned on them in that last second, and that we're watching the team just be destroyed. Like, I want to see Zordon like become one with the coins and is like swallowed into the earth. And then cut to Angel Grove today. Like, that's totally fine. I like that they're a poor town. I think from the beginning, they're all in detention except Kimberly, who has been expelled because of what she did. She has been thrown out of school, but her parents aren't around. They're like rich working people, so they're not actually always there. So Kimberly's pretty much had to raise herself. She's very defensive, and so now Kimberly has literally been thrown out of school. Everybody else is detention. We find out because of Jason and Zach are now not friends because of what just happened. Jason's injured, Zach's also injured, and we don't understand why Zach is so angry about it. But then we learn the idea that like there is more at stake with his mom later. She's sick. I also played with the idea of maybe Zach is a legal citizen because he was born here. Maybe his mom was not. Those aspects of just little things culturally, because that's also when we were dealing with the idea of the dreamer and the dreamer movement. And I think really kind of solidifying that with that character and giving the higher stakes of why the two of them were there. I agree with Sam. Have Trini fully lean into being strong. She's strong-willed. She is Billy's protector in that moment. Bulk and Skull have to be there. I also think for me, there are a few Ranger actors who are really good actors from the original series. Like Jason Narvey, who played Skull, needed to be their teacher. Mm-hmm. He is a doctorate in Shakespearean studies. He teaches in Chicago. Like, he is the head of a theater department. Like, have him do it. Johnny Young Bosch should have been in this movie. I think Karen Ashley should have played Billy's mom. They're just those few cameos. They're good actors. And so I don't think it would have detracted any. I think for me, the casting, everything else is just going to stay the same just because that's kind of the realm that we're working in.
I forgot to bring it up, but since I did put Ernie's in my pitch, I do want to bring Paul Schreier as this version's Ernie, like running the juice bar. But also as like Easter egg, he looks like his character from Hyperforce. So maybe there's something else going on.
That'd be funny. Yeah. And so I like the idea that Billy had lost his dad and he's kind of reclused himself since then. And like, he is accidentally blowing things up at school. It's the classic, like, everybody's acting out in their own way. Trini is acting out because she's like, I don't want to say turn her into an SJW kind of character, but also have that, like, she is the defender of like the little guy. And it's because she's trying to like make up for the fact that like her parents are emotionally abusive. You don't even need to make them like evangelical, but like, she is queer. She's clearly come out to them and they're just like not having it with her. And so she's like, fine, I'm going to be the worst version of myself just to prove you wrong or prove you right. One of those things. But Jason and Kim are still friends. Like, I agree with you, Sam, that she's not completely at fault, but I think she's the one that gets blamed for it. And so she and Jason are still friends. And so Trini stands up for Billy. And then when like Bulk and Skull maybe, and then Jason steps in at that point and Zach's like, oh, that's really nice of him. So they somehow all end up at the quarry together still because like Billy's like thanking them and all these things. Because I think for me, I really want to take a like Wild Force page and have it where we think Trini is going to be the leader for most of this, which is why Rita goes after her when Jason ends up actually being the Red Ranger and Rita starts feeling those little seeds of like, oh, let me pick that one. She's the one that's going to be able to get me in with the rest of the Rangers. I like the idea that they find the coins that way and that like Kimberly shows up because she's like, well, I'm just sitting at home. And he's like, are your parents even home? And she's like, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Like those things of like, we're seeing that rebellious streak with her. But again, they're not bad kids. They're just ended up in bad situations that they decided to take the fall for or had to take the fall for. Really streamline this whole like story, cut down on all like the explanation. I like from the beginning of like that really hard Zordon. I want to keep kind of running with that. I would like a little more danger with him where it's that idea that he is seeing them as tools, not as actual people. But I also like the idea that like they've all been in stasis until the 5 coins are activated, and then the ship activates, then Alpha activates. Alpha and Zordon are reeling with the fact that like a millennia has passed, like all of this time. And then that's like when we see Rita being destroyed, we actually see her in like a pseudo armor, but she gets swallowed by magma, like molten thing. And so that's when it's something with the quarry. And Sam, it's the same thing where like there's an explosion and it's not Billy, it's actually Rita's coin activating when their 5 coins activate. And that's why they end up running away. And then Rita is able to come from there. Most of that middle for me stays a lot of the same. Again, just kind of cutting down as much as we can on that story, keeping Krispy Kreme. I agree. I think we need them to morph much earlier. I think there needs to be conflict between Trini and Jason, which then leads to Rita showing up to try to get Trini, and then have the Megazord show up just a little bit sooner. I like the cameo. I think having them be the heroes for Angel Grove, because it is that important where Zordon's like, no one can know who you are. So to give them that idea that the face of the Rangers is there. I love Rita being smacked into space. I think I'm along the same lines. We need 2 post-credit scenes. The first one is the Tommy Oliver scene, which I think is very important because Dean Israelite said it was going to be a female character. I think we need to keep that going into the sequel because then Trini is the love interest in Green with Evil. The second movie, Green with Evil arc, Trini is that.
That's why in my pitch, I made Kimberly queer because Kimberly and Tommy, their relationship is like iconic, so famous in the fandom. And also it raises the question, ooh, who's going to be cast as Tommy in the sequel? Drive up some hype.
Oh, yeah. I also think that we need to see scenes between Alpha and Zordon of like, why has no one come for us? And like Alpha's trying to get a message out to the fleet, to their army. They're trying to see if the race is even still in existence. And then finally, when the battle is happening and like the Zeo crystal is unearthed, we see during the battle that a message shows up on the ship and Alpha's like, oh no. And then it's just a kind of a thing between the two. And then the last post-credit scene would be Rita landing like on an asteroid or something, and we just see a metallic and red foot, like red muscle foot, to imply that something's coming back and it's gonna be a little vile. Because maybe Zed isn't right till the 3rd, but we need to know why Rita shows back up on the planet with more power. Like for her to show back up in the next movie and suddenly like have the crazier costume and she's silver metal now instead of gold. Like we start seeing that maybe it's Master Vile shows up, whereas Zed is now giving her power, something like that. To then set up Zed show up in the 3rd movie, I think would work really, really great. But that's kind of my pitch. Keep it mostly the same. I would redesign most of the movie because to me, I think a really cool thing would be pulling in like cyberpunk armor, almost this idea that like it's neon projections is the color. So like it's this idea that they are in armor, but then they maybe have like a shielded armor on top of that that can falter and tie them in with their Zords, and those just kind of those ideas I think would just be the design for me. I think is where I would change more, but it would just be bringing that situation, bringing in a different design team. That would just be the biggest thing where I know it's hard to do, but enough movies have done it that I would just say redesign that team. But otherwise, I think story-wise, it's almost there. And I think leading into some of the humor and camp and bringing it down to a PG rating, like we got one really gross milking joke, but like try to avoid fart humor in it because that would just make the movie bad. But that's for me. So Case, what do you got for us?
Well, so, I mean, a lot of the notes are kind of shared here. I think that we agree that the story is almost there. There's a couple of awkward spots that they don't take advantage of enough of, and that the movie is just too dark. Like the fact that it's a PG-13 movie when it really should have been a PG so that you could get kids in the seats and then sell toys would have made this movie a way more successful thing. So the goal has to be just generally across the board getting it to that range. Otherwise, you're just making the Guyver, and like, that's cool, but that's a different thing than what this was going to be. So scenes like where they all grab like lead pipes and chains so that they can go beat up people. I have a note where it's like, oh shit, did this just turn into Double Dragon? And then on FilmJoy, they were like, oh, it's turned into Streets of Rage. But considering the fact that because this movie didn't do well enough and it didn't get a sequel, I think we can all agree it was Final Fight. So we got to get it down from there. First up, you got to shave off like $1 million somewhere so you can give it to Ron Wasserman and have him write a new theme song for this.
Yeah.
Get like a new theme, either the opening credits or it could be the actual end credits, but like a new song for this team specifically from Ron Wasserman. I like that we get like an updated version of the original song. I almost would have preferred the original because it's like not updated enough in a way that's like particularly interesting. It just sounds like they didn't want to pay all the same royalties. But yeah, I mean, like they've got the power drop when the Zords come out. And like at the time, it was already kind of dated, let alone now when it's in Black Adam and they do the exact same scene. And, you know, Kanye has gone way more off the rails, I think it's fair to say. So lots of license drops in there that probably weren't doing it enough for what we actually got out of it all. Like it would have been nice to have some more just like rock in the score and not have to be like specifically like a pop song that we're aware of. But yes, I think that we are missing the Wasserman factor. Like we need a song from Ron Wasserman. Like he's so instrumental in the success of this franchise as a whole that we should have found some way to get that in there, because I think that would be huge. I think that the Breakfast Club setup is a sufficiently strong motivation to get them all in the room together. I think that having Billy have some familiarity with the mine also works well enough as a reason for why they should all go look out at it, or specifically people who actually want to go down. I find it so strange that everything is fucking surface level except for the actual ship itself. Like the Zeo crystal's almost at surface level. The coins themselves are at surface level. I think that mine people should have been fucking mining and caused an explosion, releasing Goldar and Rita. I think Goldar makes sense here because like I was like going back and forth on it. The second Nick said it, I was like, yeah, no, you gotta have at least like some lieutenant for her. She's really weak. He's much stronger. His whole deal, though, is he needs her to, like, line him with gold the way that he is. Like, he should be base monster. And then, like, gold, like, through the magic of Rita, fills up around him. And that's where we get that, like, make your monster grow bit at the end of the movie. It should be, like, rising up around him and, like, forming into, like, an armor that is this huge hulking mass. And then that way you can kind of have the best of both worlds. You can have, like, interesting stuff coming from her magic. You can actually do the make my monster grow, but you can still have him be an independent character earlier in the movie. So, like, I'd say miners are working in this mine. There's some kind of explosion. It doesn't release them immediately. Billy is excited about this whole thing because he's like, my dad, like, was identifying something that right there, and that's going to create a crack that goes on this fault line. And right there is this thing that my dad was sure was there, but he never got a chance to, like, dig to because he died too soon. Like, something like that. And then, sure, if you really want to, like, have, like, lots of, like, big stories for everyone, you can have them meet up or, like, someone not be part of the group or whatever. But if we're trying to have economy of storytelling and get them all to the quarry as fast as we can, like, have them go investigate. And that's when Rita escapes. She can go, and then, like, sort of, like, pass out because of the energy it takes to, like, free herself from whatever, like, entombing factor there is. But there's Goldar, and then there's some putties, and the putties attack the kids and they have to run. Or you could keep the car chase the way it happens. But I don't think that they should die and then just wake up in their beds. Whatever that action beat is, if it's them being chased by security or them running for putties, either way, they should fall through some kind of hole into the waters and get to the ship. Like, we don't need that whole interlude of them discovering their powers right there. Because for one, I think that the powers are way too vast to be that interesting. Like, they're already superheroes by, like, the 30-minute mark of the movie. They just don't have their, like, super suits yet. And sure, Rita outclasses them, but, like, they're really fucking powerful. And it's, like, kind of unnecessary. Like, it's not interesting to see them learn how to fight because they're not, like, doing anything with their powers. And they're not, like, expected to be actually, like, good fighters as a result of them being powered. So it kind of, like, kills both sides of it. So have them go in there. I think that the whole deal of them not having their shit together should be having their shit together enough to control the Zords, not the morphing part. I think we all said this to some effect. Like, get them morphing sooner. And so we can have it happen earlier on. It doesn't have to happen immediately, but we should introduce the options of it. Like, they're clearly bonded to the coins. Like, it's clearly working with them energy-wise. And they have now seen this monster firsthand, or at least the putties firsthand. Maybe they didn't actually see Rita and Goldar, but at least, like, they're aware of this whole thing. Murders are happening. They know bad stuff's occurring. We can have them doing training montages. They could be bad at morphing. Like, they don't have to be good at it. Like it's just, like, it has to be a thing that they're aware of. Like, maybe that's how they, like, if they are confronted by the putties, they are able to escape having morphed, but aren't able to maintain it and thus, like, fall into the ravine, whatever. Because, yeah, like, I think that the big beats there are mostly fine. So I would say, honestly, some of the language is my bigger issue. Like, as a result of how they've shaped all the monsters in this, like, everything they fight is either some kind of, like, construct summoned by Rita, or Rita, who is explicitly very bad. And so there's a lot of language in this of like, we'll kill you. And it's like, don't say it that way. You're already dealing with like non-living entities for the most part. You could just kind of roll back on that one. And this is where we're all just saying, brighten the colors. Make this Guardians of the Galaxy, not Winter Soldier. Like,
Yeah.
it's a stock superhero movie, and you could have very easily had it be like energetic and interesting. And it's really close. Honestly, a lot of this could just be cut down. Like, if you could probably shave 10 minutes, which is not nothing, but you could shave 10 minutes off this movie and get it to a pretty tight fighting weight just by that. A lot of my takes are like, God, I wish everything was buried deeper. Like the fact that like when they're going for the Zeo crystal, they should be like cutting deep into the fucking planet. That's great. You know, I like that we got a lot of time with the Zords fighting solo. That was always the complaint people had because it was harder to animate the puppets for the individual Zords as opposed to just having a person in a suit. So I get that. I do think that the Megazord should have more interesting interlocking mechanisms and should be a visually interesting thing for everyone, as opposed to kind of a generic gray thing that has a couple highlight points. Like, have big color, have big red chest, like have, you know, multicolored legs. But again, while I have like a lot of nitpicks on it all, and I agree with a lot of the takes on this, I think that's fairly close with some design issues and just being too bloated. And even stuff like Kimberly, like being a cyberbully, like, you know where this movie gets better is if you cut out her being like happy that her friend's car got destroyed. Like all of a sudden, then at least she's at least, like all of a sudden there's no contradictory information to her being upset about how she handled it. We just move on with our lives.
1000%.
So I'm very glad to chat about this movie with y'all. It's been a couple of years. I mean, it's been 6 years since it came out, and I can't believe I was podcasting when it came out and that it's been that long. But it's fun to look at and fun to kind of discuss, especially because it is like good but not great.
Yeah.
The worst I was feeling about it when I first saw it was that it was like a generic movie, and like I stand by that. Like the end credit sequence looks like that someone had the After Effect files for Transformers, and I get that it's supposed to be Zeo Crystal, but it's just like easy rendering of stuff. That their suits look a little too much like Iron Man combined with Transformers. That the Zords look too much like the Transformers stuff. That like clearly computers had figured out how to do a bunch of these things, so they could do it in theory cheaply. But it's $100 million, and they didn't make double their budget, let alone any more than that. And they should have been able to, because fucking Power Rangers is a long-standing franchise that, I mean, one, is known for being cheap, but two, is perfect for the recipe of, like, this would be popular in China. Like, you've got masked characters riding robots. Like, it should work internationally very well, and it doesn't, which sucks.
Agreed.
So, Nick, thank you for bringing this movie to discuss. Give your plugs. Where can people find you? What have you got going on?
First, I kind of want to plug some people who helped me figure all this out. I want to give a shout out to King of Doma at kingofdoma.tumblr.com for really helping me figure out what I want to do with Jason and Bulk and Skull. To my good friend Musa the 14, he also helped me iron everything out. He's Musa the 14 on DeviantArt, Musa Art on Twitter, and Moose Art on Tumblr. And as for my own stuff, I'm MyckNick McNick on Instagram. I'm probably going to be posting a lot more there. And also want to plug my Reddit account, MyckOunt, where I basically do a lot of this. By the time this podcast comes out, I'll have posted a fun little crossover thing between how like the original Yu-Gi-Oh series and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure makes more sense than you think. Had a lot of fun with that. Oh, there's one more thing. So next week, I'm going to be going on the Film Rescue Show. We're going to be swapping out Morbius for The Amazing Spider-Man 3. That could have been.
Nice.
And as like a little teaser for that, Gwen lives.
Yeah, we've had Seth from Film Rescue on before, and I'll actually be on Film Rescue also sometime coming soon. Although this episode is
nice.
banked fairly far from when it's going to be releasing, so I actually probably would guess that both your episode and my episode will have dropped by then.
So go back and find those episodes.
Yeah, go back to the Film Rescue Show. Go back in time.
Yeah.
Maddie, what have you got going on?
As always, I am the host of Saturday Morning Confidential here on Certain Point of View. That is at SMC Pod on Instagram. We got rid of the Twitter. And it's Saturday Morning Confidential on Facebook. We've got a couple new series that come out under the label of Saturday Morning Confidential. So we've got Late Night Double Feature once a month, which is everyone's favorite magical, never gonna happen film double feature, and everyone is a different guest host. It's a lot of fun. They're the weird and wonderful, and you'll love it. We're also doing the Champions Path twice a month, which is a Pokemon podcast with people who are trainers all over the world. Been fans the whole time. And then also weekly, we have Going Up and Are You Being Served podcast, which is a retrospective podcast about the British comedy series Are You Being Served from the 70s and 80s through the rest of this year. So lots going on. Also one of the two co-hosts of Exit Stage Death, which is now also on Certain Point of View, where I sit down with Emily Martinez, who is an incredible actress, and we talk about theater-based true crime stories and flops and just theater stories that are too chilling and strange to be true, but they absolutely are. So yeah, that's us. You can find us here on the Certain POV on the website or on the Discord.
Nice.
All right. Sam, where can people find you, follow you, at what point, at what place in the morphing grid? You know, tell us.
Well, you can find me here on Another Pass, which drops every 2 weeks. And you can also occasionally find me on our Discord if I remember. But I am currently very busy walking through a quarry trying to find my own superpowers. So I cannot be reached for anything that I said today. So if you have any complaints about what I said, even though I am completely right about the wigs in this movie, you can reach KSAT to lodge any complaints and all complaints. And where can they find you, Case?
They can find me on most socials at Case Aiken, although on Instagram I am holding on to dear life for my high school AIM screen name, which was Quetzalcoatl 5, because I am always pretentious. But you can find the show on Twitter at Another Pass. You can find us at the Discord server that Sam referred to. That Discord server you can find a link to at certainpov.com, where you can find tons of other great shows. I'm going to give a shout out. This is the first episode we're giving our new editor, Jeff Moonen. So I'm going to give a shout out to one of his shows, which is Fun and Games with Matt and Jeff, which we shout out a lot because our previous editor was the Matt. Matt and Jeff. But
now we love Jeff.
Yeah. Well, they've got tons of great stuff. They've got a Patreon going now, so you should all check that out. They've got so many wonderful projects. They started SideQuest, which has since turned into a YouTube series on the Certain POV YouTube channel. But the main show is such a wonderful conversation about video game culture without getting into all of the negativity that is so endemic to that kind of field of discussion. So it's wonderful. You should absolutely check that out. Then head back over to certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of this show. We are now running on our off weeks. We are doing retrospectives on early episodes of the show. So actually, we're a little ways away from getting back to the Mighty Morphin episode, but it will be coming up in due time. But outside of those off-week episodes, Sam, what have we got coming up on the next official episode of Another Pass?
Well, next time we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Another Pass is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Sam Alisea and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Jeff Moonen. Our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our intro theme is by Vin Macri, and our outro theme is by Matt Brogan.
You know what I forgot to put up here? I forgot to put up my original VHS copies of the entire Green with Evil saga. Dang it.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.